No, the question is, does he understand that I was talking about pair programming like Alhadita, like right now? That's the question. Oh yeah, I'm not sharing my screen. Let me share my screen. Share my screen. Clear screen. Share. And let's see. And I mean, honestly, I'm not really interested. I mean, I'll do it, but I'm not really interested in pair programming on my stuff. I feel like I'll confuse whoever I'm working with. Not necessarily saying that they're below intelligence. More of my stuff is complicated. It's complicated to me, right? It could be simplified. Like you look at this code right here. Like what the F? I mean, we see patterns, right, of this, and say, all right, if those are the same patterns, just different types or different data, and or these are different, same pattern, but just different types and different data, but they still conform the same pattern. Then, like, what opportunities can we take to refactor that? He's about to hop on. And maybe that's not really important right now because this is just an integration test, but it's very refactor. Like this code is going to ultimately be promoted once it's running and working. It's going to get promoted into the actual code base and not just an arbitrary test. So, like if he's adamant on working on my stuff, then I kind of don't want to do this. I kind of want to work on a new feature. But I think I've pretty much written code for all the features that I'm aware of. Courier subscribes to incoming customer orders. Courier unsubscribes. Courier accepts, declines, forfeits. Courier wants to make a call. Hey, Roman, and hey, Odie. Oh, shoot. Hold up, I can't hear anything. Hold up. I mean, it probably has something to do with my headphones not being on because I should still hear audio. Can you say something? No, I can't hear anything from you. I'm sure you hear me, right? You can nod your head and say, yeah. Okay, I hear it.
All right, cool. Yes, so how's it been?
I'm alive.
All
right.
You? So how's my internet now? Is it much better?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I had to pay an arm and a leg for it.
Yeah, let me stop sharing my thing for a second. I had a true story. Well, you should be hearing Odie right now, right, Roman? Okay, cool. So for 8 years, I was paying like $65 a month for internet.
Okay.
And the internet was download speeds were like
I think 16 megabits per second.
Okay.
And I realized last month that the condominium or the complex that I live in, internet is free, and it's 250 megabits per second. So
Wow.
I think I did the math. I've spent like $7,000 over the past like 7-8 years on internet that I could have had for free.
Oh my God.
Do you know how mentally sick I was for like 3 days? Occasionally, like 2-3 times, I got hit for late fees. I ended up having to pay like $200 something.
Wow.
And I'm like, I've been paying for internet for this long, and I get it for free, and it's faster. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Well, what can I say? I think now, I think now that you have it, now that you've got it all fixed, I think that's the, silver lining in the whole story. For me though, I don't know if you can hear me very well because it's like my audio.
It's perfect.
It feels funny sometimes. But for me though, like I had to, after, I don't know if you remember the last conference we attended. What's the name? Fsharp Exchange, right?
Yeah.
If you remember that,
mine was a disaster, man. My fault.
yours was even better. I didn't even do mine at all. It was a pre-recording, if you remember, because the internet was so bad. Do you remember?
Yeah, but
and even the pre-recording, the quality was just terrible because it was like recorded from it was recorded from a previous time when the internet was mildly okay. So guess what I had to do? Because at some point I was like, there has to be a solution somehow.
I already know what it is.
Okay,
well,
what do you think?
Okay. I'm not discriminating because they're probably expensive based on the local economy in Nigeria. But I was going to say that, well, you have two options. I'm sure the banks and other businesses, they probably have reliable internet. They have to, right? In Lagos.
Yeah.
So you're either going to pay for that type of tier of internet, or you're going to do Starlink, and you're going to be in the beta group of Starlink.
Well, okay. For starters, right? Even the banks don't really have that reliable kind of internet here. And just to be clear, I know people who work in banks and I've talked with them and all that, but part of the reason was that at my former where I used to work at an ISP before. So you remember when we first met and we were talking and all that? That time I was working at an ISP here, and the internet is wickedly expensive. So I'm getting an average of 15 megabit per second up and down at a price of, let me convert 75,000 yen to USD. $190.
109. Hold up. 200 US dollars for internet per month?
Yeah. For just 10 megabits per second. Let's say 10 to 15 megabits per second.
Isn't that a significant? I mean, that's like if you do the percentage of your monthly income compared to the percentage of my monthly income, that's like crazy unfair, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
My point exactly. And even to get it, and this is part of the reason why it's so expensive. To get it, they literally had to buy a radio antenna and put it in my house. But I had to buy the radio antenna here, buy the radio antenna that they put at their base station. And it's like they're facing each other using like microwaves and all that. And everything cost me roughly 250, or let's say 300,000. That's how much it cost me. Let me see. In USD, that would be like 100 There we go. $42,000. No, that's 3 million.
All right.
1 to 3, 1 to, yeah. Yeah. So that's like $800 in total just to get it installed, right? And
I mean, hopefully you have your own. Well, I'm not sure what the tax laws in Nigeria are, but anything that's like technical, that's an expense. I claim it on my taxes because I have my own corporation.
oh, okay, yeah. So the same thing applies here as well, right? So you're right. Like in our tax laws, I can write it off and all that, but it's just one of those things where you have to understand that me being in Nigeria, right? It's things like this that just make me exhausted because you are essentially swimming against the tide, right? You're swimming against the current because you have to deal with things like people just assuming that the fact that you're black, you're from Nigeria means you don't really. Okay, first of all, you have to even deal with people assuming that you're a scammer and stuff like that. And then when you cross that, you have to
That's
now.
the Nigerian part, the Nigerian prince. But
Yeah. So if you scale that hurdle, you have to now fight against the tide of, oh, you're not as good, right, as someone from the States and all that. If you cross that hurdle, you now have to figure out how to, fight with your internet and your light and, so many things. Not to mention the fact that, there's a lot of prejudice, right? So if I apply for a job, for example, and no matter how good my resume is, there's this prejudice where they just feel like, let's go with someone let's go with someone who is safe, right? It's better they take someone who has maybe less experience and less qualifications than I do, because it's what it is. I'm like an unknown factor, if you will. Not to mention the fact that part of the reason why the internet is so bad here is because I can't explain it, but it feels like there is some kind of, okay, let's put it this way. If you look at the infrastructure of the internet, right? Look at all the places where you have like high speed data centers, where you have like powerful networks. You notice that the closest place is South Africa. It's like you just sidestepped a whole continent and just went straight to South Africa to have your data centers and stuff like that.
It wouldn't be Italy?
No, I mean in Africa now, right?
Oh, okay.
You have internet hubs all over Europe. You have internet hubs over the States, West Coast, East Coast. You have all over Asia as well. And then for Africa, you just sidestep it. So that's part of the reason why the internet is so expensive here, because essentially the internet companies have to pay huge amounts of money to companies in Spain that are closer to the hub so that they can get connection from them, right? And I don't know whether part of it is our fault or the fault of my government.
I think Starlink is engineered differently because the whole point of Starlink is for remote areas where high bandwidth isn't as accessible.
So Starlink is a good idea, but I don't think it can deliver the kind of speeds that because think about it, it has to go up to the cloud or to space or whatever and come back down.
Yeah, but that's low Earth orbit, and that's still like you take into consideration. I thought it was like 343 meters per second sound waves. Like, I don't think the latency is that significant. It's okay. It's not like I don't know what the term is. High orbit, whatever that. No, it's pretty low, right? And I think they have a lifetime of 5 years before they descend back into Earth and burn. I honestly, I was watching a YouTube video on it, and you can research it. And the guy was doing his bandwidth speeds on it, and it was decent.
Okay, you know what? I think I'll do some more research on it. But part of the reason I said what I said is because there are two metrics we need to look at, right? The first metric,
130 megabits per second download speed, which I think is pretty fair. But I'm listening.
130 megabits.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's not bad. Anyway, the thing I was getting at is that there are two metrics here. The first metric is the response time, and the second metric is the bandwidth. You can have lots of bandwidth by jamming multiple networks together, but that doesn't improve the response time. The response time is fixed, right? So the response time for something like fiber will definitely be higher than radio waves, like LTE, for example, which is one of the reasons why you have two flavors of 5G. You have the millimeter wave and you have the regular, long distance 5G. I don't know if that makes any sense. Response time is like how fast can a packet move from point A to point B?
Well, it doesn't. Basically, that doesn't make sense. 5G, I thought it was supposed to be a protocol or a standard. It doesn't. If there's two different kinds of 5G, it makes me believe that it's just a name of a. It's like the name of a product, right?
Okay, no. Okay, no.
Standard or protocol and have two versions of it without.
No.
Okay.
No, the protocol itself can say you have two modes of operation. So it doesn't, yeah, the two modes are built into the standard. So it's not like the standard says, I don't know if that makes any sense, because the standard knows that, okay, if we were to go with one mode, right, there's a good chance that a lot of people are not going to have internet. You're not going to have good experience with it. So they now have the other 5G. So think about it, it's based on the limitations of physics itself. So you have millimeter wave, which is literally the connection I told you about, where I have a radio here and there's another radio at their base station. Now, both radios, because they are transmitting at very high bandwidths and very high frequencies, they have to the waves can't really spread as well as lower frequency bandwidths. Does that make sense? So if you have a frequency just like Wi-Fi has two standards. You have 2.5 gigahertz, you have 5 gigahertz. The reason why most routers and modems come with both of them is because 5 gigahertz gets blocked easily by doors and windows and stuff like that, whereas 2.5 gigahertz penetrates better. But 2.5 gigahertz is not as fast as 5 gigahertz. So that is what's going on with 5G, right? You have the millimeter wave, which carries like insane bandwidth. I don't know if you've seen those videos where people do speed tests on their phones and they're getting like insane, insane speeds into gigabits per second and stuff like that. Those ones are millimeter wave. And the problem with millimeter wave is that if the moment you move behind a door or the moment you move behind a tree or something, it just drops off dramatically, right? So long story short is that I paid an arm and a leg for very shitty internet.
Join a club.
Yeah.
So what do you want to pair on for like maybe 45 minutes to an hour? Do you have a project?
Oh, I do have projects.
Okay. Because I wasn't really interested in pairing on any of my stuff because it's too complicated. Unless we could start from scratch on admin monitoring, which is pretty much monitoring all the enterprise activity of the business, in which there will be notifications received when something is falling below or above what's expected. But yeah, that's really meant for when my product is complete and it's out there in the field being used. So I wasn't sure if you had anything that you were interested in doing.
Okay, you know what? Maybe because I have a project, maybe I will share my screen and both of us can work on it. I may even just make the project open source because, quite frankly, I'm exhausted. But it's
music stream project.
Not even the music stream. I have the music stream project. I kind of put it on hold. I put it on hold for a bunch of reasons. Not least of which is the fact that I'm trying to, raise money personally and do some personal stuff. So I've not really had that kind of time to invest in it. But it's still a passion project for me because I still have lots. I have over 40 gig of music files that I don't want to get lost. And I know today is a streaming world and everything. Part of the reason I kind of stopped was because I was afraid that it's a project that I could spend hours and hours of work on and I would have no way of really selling it, right? Because asking people to stop streaming music and start owning music files again, it just, a part of me just felt, the techie in me wants to put in my energy and effort and work on it and all that. But the business minded part of me is like, if you build, you're building it for a consumer, you're building it for a user. And if the user can't see why your product exists, your product will die. So that's pretty much the only reason why I just like slow down, putting a lot of energy on it. But like I said, it's something that I personally want and I want it badly. Because if anything were to happen to my hard disk that has over 40 gigs of music, that would be devastating. That would be like losing a loved one. That's like years and years of memories. Does that make sense? So
yeah, but if it's all like, if it's on another server on the World Wide Web, like who cares? You could get it back, right?
yeah. But more
You
importantly,
can literally write a script, which would be another project, to rehydrate your hard disk with music that are on all the servers.
True, but I just feel like it would be nice if I also had so let me tell you why the project existed in the first place, right? I have lots and lots of music. Like I have entire collections of Enya, I have entire collections of Yanni and stuff like that. Now, some of those music are on other streaming services, but there are situations where I even find like, okay, there are remixes to songs that I liked a long time ago that, streaming services don't have. And it would be nice if I could still, and from time to time, I'd be just remember that, oh, okay, there's this song, there's that song, and I just want to quickly listen to that one song. I don't want to have to rehydrate the whole 40 gigs or search through the whole 40 gigs to find the song I'm looking for. So it would be nice if I had something similar to Google Drive, right? So imagine these were documents, then all I would simply need to do is just upload it to Google Drive. And on my phone, I can just quickly open it and find that one document I'm looking for, right? But with music, it's not that straightforward, right? Imagine if I had like a Google Drive for music, such that on my phone, I can just open it up and just look for that one song and play it, without having to go through track 1, track 2.mp3 and all those kind of craziness.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main idea behind it. But the problem with that is that, for better or worse, people have decided to just go with streaming services, and you have to convince them to ditch their streaming service and come and join you and pay you money for it. So those are some of the things that I looked at. I said, you know what? I still want to do this. And it's something that I've been putting a lot of energy and effort into that I don't want to throw away. But it's what it is. It's what it is. Let me just focus on getting other stuff, getting stable. I think that is the most priority right now. Anyway, that said, there is a project I was kind of given. So I need to give you like an explanation of the project. So there is this. So I'm in Nigeria, right? And in Nigeria, we have different tribes, and different tribes come from different states. But more importantly, is that they have different villages. Right now, each village, we normally hold like meetings where members of the community come together. We talk about issues and stuff like that, funerals and stuff. Planning for funerals, planning for all kinds of things. So I was asked politely to build a web application that allows people to do registration. So the idea here is that the members can register on the platform, and then they can, when the member registers, if there are dues, like, okay, you're supposed to pay for XYZ dues, they will get like some kind of invoice that says, okay, this is how much you're owing, this is how much you're supposed to pay as part of your membership of the group, of the village or whatever. And then they should be able to like pay online. But more importantly, I think the beginning part is the registration, being able to register, put in their details, put in the village they come from, where they currently live, their current address, and that's it. It's not a complicated project. It's a very simple project. So I am currently building it with the safe stack. So that includes Fsharp end-to-end, Elmish, and all that. I am using Kubernetes and Docker to run the applications and all that. So it's something I started, I think, 2 weeks ago, and I want to see if I can kind of finish it up. So do you want to take a look?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So let me see. I will need to change my display settings.
Are you using Kubernetes to like for like political reasons to make sure that, well, for your portfolio, or
well, yes, and
say I legitimately want to do Kubernetes instead of Azure Functions.
Yeah, I legitimately want to use Kubernetes.
Okay.
It's cheaper for me. So I pay a fixed amount, right, for servers, and I'm able to host as many applications as I want. Now, remember, at the moment, I'm not being paid for this. So I don't have any money to be spending on Azure Functions or whatever the case may be. And I already have infrastructure on ground already that I've already paid, that I pay for on a monthly basis. So it just made sense to me to just go that route, right? Yeah. So let me see if I can share my screen.
What's interesting is someone that I'm very close to, I don't know if the right term is transcribes, but she participates in board meetings for like condominiums and startups, startup incubators, and she's responsible for taking notes, and it takes like maybe 3 days or whatever, but then there's like a detailed document of the meetings, the questions, the points, the agendas, etc. Why am I mentioning this? Because I'm curious if the objective that you stated, if it has a commercial platform that could be built, versus this just being specific to village attendees and people paying dues. I wonder if there is an abstraction of an overall platform that is a similar pattern with others, and it could be coded and then put out there into a store or something. I don't know. That's just my brain working, because it's always trying to capitalize on opportunities based on arbitrary events.
Yeah. I think there is. I think there is an abstraction here. It's just
Right now, it sounds like you're talking about just building some software to register people, and that's it.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that's like the short-term goal. The long-term goal is that software will also have things like dues, levies, and payments. That's it. So it will have paying members and non-paying members. Now, you have to understand that some of these meetings, as you grow older, you get to a particular age, you become exempt. You become exempt from the dues, the levies, and so on and so forth. So really old people in the society, they don't pay. And they just need some kind of software that can keep track of all of that. Now, part of the reason why I didn't want to start abstracting it is because there are idiosyncrasies in the way the in the way they run the whole thing that doesn't really work well in other contexts, right? And there's also the fact that could I have abstracted this thing even more? I just feel like, let me just build what is obvious first, right? Then I can now later take a step back and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This is things I can abstract out rather than trying to put in that abstraction in the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yep. Are you sharing your screen? I assume we're using your editor, right?
Yeah. So let me share my screen. So can you see my VS Code?
No. Oh, yeah.
All right. So this is a bunch of stuff. But I'm going to break down each folder and I'll explain what each of them does. So you have, this is the application folder. Then you have some files here. Okay, before I even get to the files, you have...
It's hard to read the
Oh,
name.
is it tiny?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Are you on dual monitor or something?
Is it better now?
It improved, yes.
Should I add one more step or this is okay?
I don't think it improved, but I don't think it's okay.
Okay.
That's better.
All right. So, yeah, here we have some configurations for .NET tools. Obviously, I'm using Packet, Fake, and a tool called Fluent Migration. Very powerful stuff. Very powerful too. I really like it. Fluent Migrator. Then I have a folder for deployment, which contains the files after I've built it. Then I have a folder that has all the Kubernetes configuration in it. And then I have source code and I have tests, right? The tests, I have tests for both server and the shared libraries. And here I have tests for I have the main application, right? So here we have the client, the server, and shared libraries between the client and the server. That's what this is. And yeah, basically a build.fsx, which allows me build and run the application. And I can come here to what do they call this? I can come here to the Fsharp menu and see essentially what is important here.
All right.
So
are you ready?
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. Okay.
If you don't want to go down this rabbit hole, I understand.
Okay.
I'm just curious what your opinion is. All right. So I just got overwhelmed with information with your Solution Explorer.
Yeah.
And so again, if you don't want this to be part of our session and you want to devote attention to things that you deem more important, then I understand.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You can go ahead. Yeah.
When I like designing the Solution Explorer so that if someone else if someone else happens to open up Visual Studio, it's exactly what the application is purposed for. So everything that doesn't revolve around the intent or the purpose of the application, I pretty much obfuscate away and I throw it inside of a arbitrary folder. Like I create a folder called Foundation, and I just shove everything that's about the system into that folder, and I have everything about the actual domain of the business visible and apparent. So that's my only feedback, and it's not really about code. It's about designing your structure. If programming really is a culmination of something that's understandable in addition to instructing the machine for humans.
Okay. In that case,
because here I don't see anything yet about what this application is supposed to do looking at the file system.
Okay. Technically speaking, I haven't even gotten into the business domain just yet.
Okay.
So maybe I should run the application so that you see what is actually available, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see if I
I'm curious what the three observers, what their first thoughts are. They're like,
if I
Scott,
say
not just you because you're very, I don't know, uh, unorthodox.
okay, so I'm running the application here. Here you use .NET Fake build and you specify the task as run. So that will build the client side and the server side, and it will run both of them. Okay. Yeah, I think it's still building the clients. Oh, my migrations. I need to have my database running. Let's see. Let's open Docker. Maybe I should share my full screen.
So this is a
Hold on.
web application
Yeah.
that
Let me
runs
share
on
my.
top of MVC, Blazor.
No, it's using the safe stack. So you
Oh,
can see
you did say that.
you can
Okay.
you can see my entire screen, right?
Mm, let me click back on it. Yeah.
All right. So let's see. I'm currently my code behind is not running. So let me go ahead and so if I say Docker, Docker PS rather, let me maximize this, increase the font size. Okay. I have Docker running. Yes, Docker is running. So if I say Docker PS, I don't have any containers running. So if I say Docker PS minus A, you can see I have a bunch of containers that have already stopped, but the container I care about is Postgres. So I want to run my database. So that's Docker start Postgres. There we go. And now if I say Docker PS, Postgres is running. The beauty of Docker is that now if I say pgadmin, I can actually just interact with the database, and I didn't have to install any dependencies on my machine, which is awesome to me anyway. Let's see. Still starting up. There we go. Yeah, I need to put my password. And if we come here under localhost, this is the database. Currently, I only have how many tables? I think I have I have a few tables. I have registrations, I have addresses, I have users, I have villages, and that's it. Even
So
this,
this is
yeah,
SQL if you're saying table.
yeah. This is Postgres.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Postgres. So essentially SQL anyway. Let me see. Does it have users? I think it has users. Okay, yes, it does have users. Just one test user for now. But the reason why I needed that running is because I need to rerun this. So come back here on .NET Fake build.
So here's a question.
Yeah.
Your general workflow,
Mm-hmm.
do you immediately pull in the various vendor tools like the database and the I think you said Docker and all that stuff, or do
Mm-hmm.
you just iterate on the business problem and then you fasten the vendor tools on later? What's your usual workflow?
So okay, so my usual workflow, right? How I even got here in the first place was I just said, a .NET new safe stack application. So these
Okay.
projects you're looking at was actually created by the template. I didn't edit it. I didn't make any changes to it. Most of these files, I didn't create them. You get. So I will, as time goes on, I'll start to refactor things out. But I just wanted to have something that works, as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I got to this point. So things like this editor.config.
Isn't this called like is it called like walking skeleton, where like the methodology is you run a server connected hello world and you keep adding to it, and so it's always integrated. Is that called
Precisely.
walking skeleton? I forgot what the term
Yes,
is.
precisely. You just hit the nail on the head. So this application that we're looking at right now is actually live. This is
Okay.
it. ODUReg, qbridge.com. I think it's still loading up. But
Yeah.
that's it.
I could see that. I could see the arguments for it.
Yeah. So essentially, this is it. It's just a login page. That's all I've done. Funny enough, believe it or not. Yeah. Let's see. Why is it not responding? I'm supposed to see some kind of error. Okay, no, I haven't merged with. Have I? I thought I did. I'll come back to this. It's just a login page I've done. There's nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've not even started at attempting to solve business problems or anything like that. I just wanted to see, can I just do a simple login page, create users, and that's it.
Let's
Right?
solve business problems, because I don't know any of this other stuff that you're doing. I'm not familiar with those vendor tools.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be worth more if I were, but.
So let's test this out. Let's try this. Let me try in. No,
it's really. Can you do something about the resolution again?
Oh, sorry. You know what? A better approach would be, give me a moment. Better approach would be to just increase this to 200,000. I'm sorry, 200%. This should be better. How about now?
Okay.
Let me reset this. How about now? Is this still tiny or?
No, it's better.
All right. So, that's literally all I've done. This is literally all I've done. Just being able to go to a home page, being able to log out and log in again. From here, and this, I'll put a password. Log in. Now, what I was so part of the reason why I haven't started tackling like the business problem was that there was no problem, there was no business requirement to begin with. The issue I was given was quite vague. What they just wanted was initially, so just to give you some context, right? This project is for my community, and one of the leaders in the community, because my dad is part of the executives of the community, but they didn't talk to him concerning the project. He knows about the details of the project, but they didn't say anything to him. They just came to me and told me, hey, can you quickly do this for us? And what they wanted was it was just simply, we want to be able to capture people's data. That's it. Just to have a list. So in this page here, there'll just be a list of contacts, maybe paged and whatnot. And then you can add, you can say register, register a new, register someone and just put in the person's details and click save, and that's it. And it should have the ability to search. So if they want to look for somebody or they want to filter by a particular village, that's it. That's literally what I was told to do. However, when I spoke with my dad, I was like, this doesn't really make sense. And he was like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. That what this was supposed to be was you have this portal where members of the community can come in, log in, right? And they can see their dues, see how much they are owing, make payments, stuff like that. And then administrators on the platform would be able to search for individuals, find individual phone numbers, find contact information, those kind of things, as well as knowing, okay, we want to post a particular due, say, oh, we all need to pay for X, right? And each person is supposed to pay, say, 100 naira or $100 or whatever. And then, that due will get broadcasted to everybody's invoices. So people will see that, okay, we are owing XYZ amounts, and so on and so forth. Just basic accounting. That was what this was supposed to solve, right? But what I decided to do was, let me first do the obvious, which is just essentially just a CRUD for registrations. Do the obvious, meet them, have a conversation, and get out. Okay, at that point, we have like some kind of basis in order to build further upon. It wasn't supposed to be a serious project or something like that. It's just something just to get the conversation rolling. Okay. So what I was about to do, right? And this is kind of the goal of this pair programming, is I just want to be able to come here. So initially I wanted to just put a registrations page and just give, just list out all the registrations, but I kind of shied away from that. What I want to do instead is to have a kind of dashboard here, the dashboard that has different segments. Okay, and one of the segments will just say registrations. So when you click it, it would now take you to a registrations page that will just show you all the members. Or maybe to just, instead of calling it registration, I can just call it member. Is it members?
Yeah, I was going to say the latter sounds better.
Yeah. A part of the reason why members is not really correct is because not all people who are registered are actually members of the organization. Does that make sense? Remember that this is
So
for
you
a
have
community.
different
Yeah.
stages of registrations.
Yeah, this is for a community. So say for example, you came and you started living in that community, you will be registered even though you're not a member of the community.
Call it registration status, or just call it community. I don't know. Or call it group.
Okay.
I'm sure it'll come out later.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe what I'll do is I'll call it.
You can still keep your registrations, and you just have a status of what it is per member.
Okay. Let's do that then. So before I continue, let me see. Set this zoom. Can you see it, or is it too tiny?
I see it.
Okay. So let me go over what I've done because it's a lot. And I agree with you that this is quite intimidating in terms of number of files and all that. But it just came out from the template. Maybe I'll try and see if there are ways I can reduce the.
What is that INI? What am I looking at? No, that's Visual Studio Code. They don't have scope to this as a menu item.
No.
Okay.
That scope to this is Visual Studio. Yeah, this doesn't have it. Okay, let me think of ways of cleaning this up, right? Let me think of ways of cleaning this up. What do you think? Think.
Well,
okay.
I'm listening.
Okay. So what I will do is I will create a folder. Package.json, client, server, shared.
I would. Okay.
No. What were you about to say?
I was going to say I would identify the various subdomains of the application as a child of the root directory, and instead of it being buried all up in there, and that would be the first step, and then I would just throw all that stuff under a arbitrary folder, and if they want to dig into the system details, and they can expand that root folder, else they can look at the subdomains of the actual business application. That's the way I would organize it. But
no, what you say makes sense, and that's precisely what we, I do even at my place of work and all that. But the question is, what do you think the subdomains of this application will be? Given what I've explained to you, what should it be?
It would be registration. It would be something that relates to payments, right? You said dues have to be paid, and so to me, that's a boundary, right? So this application is this application taking money, or it's just reporting the financial state of a member based on what their dues are?
It's just reporting the financial state. Eventually, it may take money, but for now, it's just to report the financial state. That's it.
Do they need to pay as to register, or
no, they don't need to pay to register.
All right, so it sounds like those are two different functions then, because if they had to pay in order to register, then it sounded like it was just one subdomain so far. But it seems like those are two different functions of the application.
Yeah, but what I want you to what I want us to iron out is you can't deploy subdomains. You deploy applications, right? So what will be the name of the thing we deploy, and where will we keep that thing?
Well, I thought you said it was a community or something.
No. I mean, so here, so let me just give you an idea of what maybe I should I show you, let me show you an existing project, maybe to help everything, kind of click better, right? Let's take, I don't know if I should be showing you my office code, but
No,
whatever.
just remember, you're not just showing me, you're showing the other three people that are observing this stream.
Yeah, I know. Should I use that?
Well, it's 2:40 in the afternoon up there. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. Okay, you know what? I get what you're saying, and typically, what we do is we have like a main application, and then you can now have different folders for all the libraries or subdomains and stuff like that, right? But in this particular case, what name would we give the main thing we deploy? The app that brings in all those subdomains together. Does that make sense?
Oh, I mean, I think so. Registration. I don't know what else to call it.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that. Let me create a folder. Nah, it can't be registration because it may have more things. Okay, I have an idea. Let me create a folder. I'm going to call this folder.
The thought process is it's about registering. There could be core, and then there could be payment state or whatever. But okay, what were you thinking?
What I was thinking is to say web. So this is the web application, right? That is what this is. And then we can have other folders for the different, should I say, libraries, if you will. Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying?
Kind of. In a way, I kind of feel like we're getting bent up and held up on folder names. And I'm not sure if maybe we should just start focusing on code. I'm not sure which one is a better objective. Maybe if we focus on coding, maybe that will help derive some of the names. I don't know.
All right, fair enough. Okay, let me, should I go ahead and explain what I've written so far, right?
Okay.
Let me see. Sorry, let me see if I can. Okay, so here I have 3 projects. This project is the client side. As you notice, it has a bunch of files, right? You have views, you have types, you have state. You know, a better approach would be to use this. So we have the client code here. And at the bottom, you have the app itself. So this is an Elmish application. It includes some CSS styling. Here we are creating the initial state. Well, here is where we are constructing the application, literally, right? We take the initial states, the updates, and the view. Are you familiar with Elmish, with the Elmish architecture?
I'm familiar with Elm. I did a project in Elm, but no,
okay.
I'm not familiar with Fsharp's implementation of it.
Okay, but you do know what the init function does, the update function, the view function, what they do.
Model view update.
Yeah, model view update. Okay. So again, the init function initializes the initial state of the application. The update function handles events, and the view function does the rendering. That's literally it. So this is how you assemble it. Here I had to import some side effects, to get I had to import the CSS file. The reason why we're importing the CSS file here is because of Webpack. So Webpack is the JavaScript, should I say, library or framework or whatever, whose job it is to.
Oh crap! You there?
And give us the ability to compile it into JavaScript and run it for us. Okay. It allows us to even do things like it sets up a dev server, and then we can proxy calls to /API. Anything /API will be proxied to the backend. So the backend will be listening on 8085, while the front end will be listening on 80. Now, when we package this, when we package this application, it's going to dump the deployed application into this folder called deploy/public. So if we take a look here, we're inside the deploy folder. Maybe let me go ahead and run this. Let's go to our package manager. We have a build here. So let me stop this here. So I say npm run build. This Webpack is going to package the entire application and essentially bundle it inside this deploy folder. Why is it taking forever? Okay, still compiling.
I'm happy as a mobile developer, and I don't have to deal with all the details of just deploying. Like, I thought mobile development was complicated. At least I get to focus on the actual business agenda. This stuff is like, it's just a whole bunch of vendor and community mumbo jumbo. Oh my god!
No, you see, they're seeing it that way because part of the reason why you're seeing it that way is that you don't see all the complexities that Xamarin brings because you're used to it.
Yeah,
like me, essentially how you feel is how I feel when I enter into mobile development and I see I have to deal with Xamarin and all of that and emulators and all this kind of stuff. It's like
true, but I think the difference is with Xamarin, instead of having all these different directories and files, I just have packages that I just don't see. They're reference dependencies. I pull them in, but I don't have to deal with that noise. And I guess that's like one of the things I'm just more sensitive to, I guess, now in my development, is I try to remove as much noise and distraction as possible. Translated, I try to do my best to abstract away the scaffolding so I could focus on the actual business of the application. Like, I look at web development and I'm like, I don't care about all this scaffolding. I just want to solve the business problem. And it's like, I don't know, maybe it's just different. Maybe people are just forced to confront it and deal with it.
Yeah, the truth is web development has gotten very, very complex over time. I think over the past, 4 or 5 years, that's been really, really complicated. And believe you me when I say that even though this is complicated, right, it's still simpler than most setups that I've seen. Part of what makes this complicated is Webpack, to be honest. But in here, Webpack is a necessity. But in things like Angular or React, Webpack is just one of those things that just makes things more complicated than they should be. But it's what it is, and I've learned to live with it. So, Anyway, point of all these things I just said is that when I run npm build, right, that builds all the static assets. So it builds all the JavaScript for me into this JavaScript JS file. It builds all the CSS. I think the CSS even gets, it builds it into this output. You can see there's this style.app, webpack, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. Now that
I'm listening.
So now that it has deployed all the static assets, in other words, all the client-side code gets compiled into this, and it gets put into this deploy public folder. Let's take a look at the server side. So for the server side is a lot cleaner, by the way, or rather a lot saner. Let me collapse some of these. The server. The server side is a lot saner and simpler. What you have is your startup.cs, which is where it's like your program.cs file, right? This is the main function that when you run your app, you have a main function. And here all it's doing is it's setting the path to that public folder. Remember the
main.l.
Yeah. Remember inside the deploy folder, we had the public folder that had the static files. So here is where we are specifying the public path.
Okay.
Then we are setting the server port to 8085. So we first try to see if the environment variable exists. If it doesn't exist, we give it a default of 8085. That's the port here. I have some Serilog login configuration that I do here, but ultimately it builds a web host. Okay. The web host is the web server. That's what's listening for your HTTP requests. Okay. Here we specify the public part, the web root, content root. In other words, this folder is where it's serving all its files from. So if you hit a URL that happens to match a file name in that folder, that file will get served like a normal web server. Okay. I added some other stuff like database migrations here and so on and so forth. But I think you get the main gist of this part. This is where we are configuring our web server.
Yep.
Now, as part of the web server, we have a place where we configure it. So the configure function is here. Let me collapse this so we can have more space. This configure function is precisely this guy. It's saying just set up all these middleware. I don't know if you are familiar with middleware. Are you familiar with them?
I don't think so.
Okay, let me describe what it is.
No. What do I code?
At least for your viewers, right? So there's a diagram that just explains it.
All right.
There we go. This is it. Your request comes in, it jams the first middleware. That middleware now has to decide, do I want to process this request, or do I want to hand it over to the next middleware? Okay, that's what happens here.
That's
that goes.
Concept. I didn't know that there were. I didn't know that you could have multiple instances or multiple versions of middleware running.
Yeah. You can.
I've always thought middleware was just a single mediator executable, and that's it. I never thought of middleware as a set of mediators that will participate in chain of responsibility. I've never. See, this is valuable to me. This gave me some insight. Okay.
Yeah. That's good. That's literally what it is. Literally, you have a request comes in, and then each middleware decides and hands over to the next one, and so on and so forth, right? And then they can generate a response. This is how the whole ASP.NET ecosystem is built. This is how you can have F#. You can have in the C# world, they use MVC. In the F# world, we use Giraffe, and it works perfectly well because so in C#, right, I would swap, let's say, this middleware with MVC. This would be MVC, and in F#, I'll just swap this with Giraffe, and that's it. And then how Giraffe handles the request is up to Giraffe. That's literally what's going on here. And to prove my point, that's literally what you're looking at. You have a bunch of middleware. So, for example, this one is for static files. This default files. Yeah. Don't worry about this one. This one adds response compression. This has static files. This adds authentication and authorization. Why are they even duplicated? That's odd.
Sorry, Roman. I didn't look at my comments. Web development is as complicated as you choose a bit. You can still just emit HTML directly on the server side if you want. And as far as I know, there are alternative frameworks built around pushing HTML instead of having a lot of JS or JavaScript on the client.
Yeah. That's actually correct. So he's right. You could decide, you just want to render pure HTML and keep it at that. So yeah. So here I have some authorization, authentication, Serilog request logging. This should come. Should it be before or after authentication? I think it should be before authentication. probably even before static files, right? Anyway, anywho, long story short is that at this point, this is where I have the giraffe middleware. And pay attention, if you notice, the giraffe middleware has this, is using this function, handlers.routes. So let's take a look at what those routes look like. This is it. So you have a route that says, if you do a get request to this URL, call this function. If you do a post request to this URL, call this function. If you do a post to this URL, call this function, and so on and so forth. Now, if I check this, you can see here that these are the URLs in question. That's it. Also notice that I put those URLs in the shared library. So the shared library is shared between both the client side and the server side. This allows me to put objects that are common to both, dimensions, if you will. So that includes things like the declared routes, and that also includes things like the transfer objects, right? The objects I use to transfer between the client and the server. Right.
That's interesting. I usually have to tag my members with I have to use like the data attribute, I think, for my members in order for JSON to successfully go to the other end.
Yeah, but
that's working for you. Just CLI mutable, and that's it.
Okay.
That's
what I use essentially. So let's go back to shared. So shared just literally has this shared data, but the client side is what's complicated, but the server side is pretty straightforward. So here, let me come back here. So we have our startup. This startup is where I configure everything. So things like the configuration, uses app settings.json, blah, blah, blah. The important part is the handlers. So this route essentially tells you how it's responding to different URLs. So the init handler, that brings us here. What it does is it tries to check to see if you're authenticated. If you're authenticated, then it just builds a configuration object, really. And this configuration object has two things in it. It has the user, whether or not the user exists, and it also has these debug controls. The reason why we have these debug controls here is because of something I will show you later, right? If I enable this, what it allows me do is it allows me jump to different states of my web application so that I can easily test it. I used it in a more complicated project. So for now, I don't really have any use of this, but I'm going to build on it very soon. Anyway, so here, this is where I serialize the configuration using an encoder, serialize the configuration into string and return the string back. So the meaning of this is that if you come here and go to localhost 8085/API/init, I don't think it's running. Let me see. Is it running? I think I may need to. Oh yeah, no, I need to run it. So again, .NET fake build that runs the fake script that launches our application. And if I refresh this now, yeah, this may not reflect immediately.
So have you written any code to actually register?
Yes, I have.
What does that look like? And did you handle the constraints yet?
No. So the code I have to register, I just kind of, just threw it together just so that I can test the login. But I'll explain in a moment. Let's see. Here, okay, good. So this is it. So in the init, so in this init endpoint just returns this. It returns whether or not the user is logged in and so on. Now let's say I want to log out. So that will be /account. And it has to be a post. So better for me to do it from the UI. So let's go to localhost 8080. Let me log out. So now that I've logged out, if I refresh, you'll see it's gone. Okay. All right. So, I'm thinking of what to talk about next. Should I talk about the registration?
Yeah. Like I
Okay.
want to get into the business
Oh,
details instead of the system details.
okay. So at the moment, I just have this function, this module that contains two functions. One function to create the user, the other function to validate existing users, right? To validate a username and password pair, or what I call a login. And here so here I just take a context, which is the database context, and I just encrypt the password. After encrypting the password, I now check. So I write a query. So I'm using, so,
We're on the server, right?
yeah, this is on the server. Should I go ahead and explain how I set up the database?
No,
Okay.
I don't. Well, unless Roman cares about it.
Yeah, because this is the reason why I was telling you that I'm thinking of writing a library. Because, and in fact, this is even the reason why most of my projects have been like stalled. Because to be quite frank, the database story in F Sharp hasn't been great. Has been, in my opinion, it's not really that good. And one of the things I've been thinking of ways of solving it. And one of the ways I plan to solve it is using this thing, called DBML. Did we discuss it? Did I explain it to you?
Yeah, I think so. Database meta language.
Yeah, database markup language, where you just write a language like this, right? You write something that looks like this. Let me copy this, and then it will be in a file called DBML. And then you could come here and go to, say, DB diagram, right? And you can visualize. So let me try and say create your diagram so that you can visualize. Ask me later. You can visualize your DBML file. So this is an example of it, right? Let me see. So you can see you can describe tables, describe posts, describe enums, and then you can describe relationship between tables, and then it will show you something like this, that okay, users have multiple posts and so on and so forth. So my idea was that I would take this DBML file, write a type provider for this DBML file that would generate the necessary types. So in order to set this up, let's look at our database.fs. So I had to write essentially all of this, right? So I said, okay, this is a user has user ID, email, first name, last name. User ID is a GUID. I have registration, I have address, I have village. And then I now had to write this data context, right? So here is where I specify all the different tables. So we have a users table, we have a registrations table, we have addresses table, we have villages tables. Now, part of the reason why it looks this ugly is because Entity Framework, which is the ORM I'm using to do this, doesn't really play well with F Sharp. It uses a lot of mutable variables and stuff like that. That's why it looks ugly like this. But it's what needs to be done. So I was thinking that rather than have this database.fs file, I could use type providers to auto-generate it. That way, all you simply care about is just this file that just says these are the tables, these are how the tables refer to each other. And once you have that file in your project, you would be able to do things like this. You would be able to write queries and say, okay, for each user in the list of users, check where the user email is the login email and the password is the password hash, and return that user, right?
So, in hindsight, based on the project that I've been working on for 2 years in my past time,
Yeah.
I would do things differently now.
Okay.
So I had gone through this. I had pulled in SQL Server and I started developing all these relationships between tables and foreign keys and primary keys and how things map to everything else. And I was doing all this overhead.
Mm.
And this is more of a question or potentially a debate. Is this project is like really small, right? Like you're probably going to have less than 1,000 users, or no? Like how many users do you plan on having?
Well, So in terms of registrations, right? The registrations may be tens of thousands. It's not, I don't even think it's up to tens of thousands, to be honest. But actual users, people who are logging into the site, interacting with the site, I'm just looking at maybe 100 max, you
This
know.
this is speaking for my own project.
Mm,
This is how I would have done things, and I'm not sure if it's applicable for this one.
okay.
If I could go back, I wouldn't deal with a relational database.
Mm,
If the number of if I expected to have a low count of users. In hindsight,
okay.
what I would do is even if I were using a relational database, regardless of the database uh, technology, I
Mm-hmm.
would just save a JSON string that would represent uh, an iron numerable of users, and I would just update it and just shove it in that data store, and then pull it out, and then I wouldn't, because like for my case, I'm not doing any like analytics. Like I'm not. I just want to take orders, process
Mm-hmm.
it, and save it. Take members, add a new member to the
Mm-hmm.
collection, serialize it, and push it to for it to be saved. And
Mm-hmm.
so, in hindsight, that's what I would do now. I'm not sure if this is the same pattern because I found myself like after I did everything, it was severely
Yeah.
over-engineered.
Mm.
And it works. It proves that I know how to use SQL Server Management Studio. But
Mm-hmm.
what took me like maybe 40 to 60 hours to get done. I could have easily done that in like half an hour.
Mm. Well, in this particular case, right? I would say that this isn't that different. And okay, it's not that different because see, take a look at this, right? The moment you the beauty of entity framework and all that is that the moment you describe your object, your record object structure, you would use it exactly how you would use a NoSQL database, right? You just have a context, which is essentially an object that you can just say context.add and you can add your object to it. And when you want your object back, you can say context.users and you get your object back. And I didn't have to write any JSON serialization and so on and so forth. Because whether or not I store JSON into the database, right, I still need to filter it. I still need to check if the password is correct or not. So in terms of practicality, I think this is very practical. It's just what makes this annoying, and this is why I'm saying that I wanted to start working on that particular project before I do any major F# work. Is it's not the interaction with the database that is annoying. What's annoying is setting all that up, right? So, for example, here's what's annoying to me. Let's go to in database or FS. This is fairly easy to do. This is also iffy to do, but I don't even like this, to be honest. In fact, I don't even like all of this, right? But this I can live with. However, the one that is just, that grinds my gears is the migrations. So here you can see that there is a migration.001.fs, right? So here I'm using a library called Simple Fluent Migrator, right? Is one of the best migration tools I've seen. The one that comes with this thing out of the box, the one that comes with Elmish out of the box is something called Simple Migrator, and for me, that is just blasphemy. I hate that thing. Because you have to write raw SQL and all that, and for me, that's a no-no. Whereas in this one, this is a little bit better, but I have to literally write all this Fluent migration stuff. Whereas in the C# world, I would just simply say something like a new C#, or rather, I could just say something like a create migration. Even in Python, even in Node.js, I can just say create migration, and it will figure out what the difference is between my current structure, within what is the current structure of my entities, and then it would write a migration for me. I know I'm speaking a little bit. I don't know if you are following what I'm saying, but
No, I do. That's I
the
didn't know
point is,
people can do that.
the point is having to write this by hand is annoying to me. And if I can automate it, I think this whole process would have been a lot easier, which is what brought the whole idea of saying, you know what, why can't I just have a DBML file that just has the definition, right? And then I can generate this, I can generate all this and generate even this from it, right? Using a type provider. That's my idea in general, you know, in summary. Okay, but heading back, right? So these are the two pieces of business logic I have. The first one is to validate a user. You pass it a login, and the login has a password and it has an email. So I come here, filter users by that, and then if the user exists, if the user exists, then I map. Why am I mapping? Yes, I'm mapping a database table because this is literally a database table, a database record. I'm mapping a database record into the user object. Okay, and when I want to create a new, when I want to register a user, right? I come here, check to see if the user exists. And if the user exists, then I just return an error that says user already exists. Otherwise, I go ahead and, create a user object, encrypting the password, obviously, and then storing that in the database. So I add that to the collection of users and I call save changes. That's it.
You could just do okay. Here's the code carrying within your try block. Can't you just say do bang and then context.save changes?
Let's see. I know it's a compile error. Question is why.
Yeah, and then append a pipe to ignore at the end of it.
Okay. No, not even pipe to ignore. This would be typically I would say something like this: async dot ignore, right? But this is a task that we're talking about, and I don't think there is a task dot ignore. You get. So let me see. No, there's no task dot ignore. Let me even try a regular ignore because this is okay. Let me, because I need to explain why it looks the way it does. Yeah, you can't just say ignore. The reason why it has to be the way I wrote it is because of the lead bang, right? So
give me a second. I don't know what a async result expression is, but it looks like it derives from async.
So
all right, well, I mean,
no. I think you're raising very good points. I think this is the library that it came from. FS Toolkit error handling. Let's take a look at it, shall we? So let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. Okay.
Roman asked a question. He said, why do you need the database migration stuff supporting multiple database types?
It's supporting multiple database instances. So let's go back to, that's a very good question. Let's go back to our startup, right? So you can see here on line 88, we have migrate database. So the idea here is that while the app is running, if the app is running for the very first time, it will also migrate the database. Let's see what is inside that. Boom, that brings us here. So what is going on here is that I run the database migrations. What the database migrations does is it allows you to version your database. So say, for example, I run this application for the very first time, right? And when I run it for the very first time, this migration.fs, right, tells it, okay, you're running for the very first time. Go ahead, create a table called users, create a table called villages, and so on and so forth. Create registrations, create addresses. And if someone were to downgrade this DB, just get rid of everything. That's what the down is for. So up is for upgrade, down is for downgrade. Okay. Now, if I add new entities, if I add new data, if I change my database structure in any way, shape, or form, I will be forced to come here and create migration 002.fs. And again, I had to do some hackery for this. So if you go back, you can see that in our compile, I have added a star here. Okay, so the star is saying that any file that is inside this migration, irrespective of the name, just include it and as part of your compilation. All right, so here I would now create a migration 002 and I would write out the changes that I want to do in the upgrade, and then I would reverse those changes in the downgrade. Okay, so say for example, I wanted to add a middle name, right? That's it. That is a good idea. So I will come here, create a new file, call it migration 002.fs, and I can just, should I just copy? Yeah, let me copy this. Let's head over to migration 002. And here, I'm still using Fluent Migrator. I still have 001, but I will change this. So this is the date that I did it. So this is 2020. This is 06/12. So this will be 28/12. What was the time? 3:14. You see why this is a pain? Because I literally have to write this. It's annoying. Let's see. 3:14:00. Okay, so that'll be 3:14. That'll be 03:14. Right? 03:14:00. Now the question is, why am I putting this exact number here? It's just so that if I'm working in a team and we create the same migration at the same time, we can tell which one came before which. Putting this exact number here is okay. So here we have our, yeah, this looks good. Let me save this. So now that we're inheriting from migration, I can now create an up that I can override. So I can say override this dot up, which would be the upgrade. For now, I'm just going to make it return unit, and I can add a downgrade, this dot down. Okay. And let me build this. It's like it's not okay now. Maybe I need to, let me stop this. Let me rerun the build. Close this. See if it will build. If it fails, if it dies, it dies. Let's see.
That's rocking Ruby.
Yeah. Okay, I think it builds. I don't know why this thing is finding it difficult. Okay, no, it doesn't build. Yeah, migration 001 happened multiple times. So I need to change this class to migration. Oops, changed the wrong thing. I need to change this to 002. And now it should work. Let's see.
Is Lagos on lockdown?
Oh yeah, not yet though, but there's a good chance that we will be very soon. So yeah, sucks. Let's see. This should build. Okay, good. Oh, this has now run the migration. Oh shoot. I feel stupid. I shouldn't have run the application. All right, fine. Let me go and undo the migration. Since I know that the migration literally didn't do anything, I'm going to, let me close this. Let me relaunch the project. All right, let's head over to, yeah, this is now working. I think the IntelliSense in VS Code can lag sometimes, but it's working now. So let me head over to the database. I had pgadmin open a while ago. Didn't I?
Like my database migration for small scale is a raw SQL script I run on startup. And then he says, anyway, if you're already familiar with this migration library, I guess you are fine.
Yeah. I like it because, so the reason I like this migration library is because I don't have to write and make mistakes with SQL, right? And secondly, this migration approach is database vendor independent. So I'm currently using Postgres, but if I was to switch over to SQL Server for whatever reason, I would not need to touch these migrations. They would work exactly the same way. And again, it has some convenience to it. So things like adding a foreign key is as simple as just saying foreign key and specifying the table you want to add the foreign key to, as opposed to having to write the funky SQL to do it. So that's the reason, I really like this fluent migrations. All right, let's head back. I was trying to delete something. Yes. So the migrations are stored in this migration table, right? So there's this version info table that shows us the version of the database based on what migrations have been run. And this is where it's storing the time that the migration was created. In this case, I want to delete this migration because let's see. Is that the ID? Oh, it doesn't have an ID. Okay. Let me see. There should be an edit here. Edit all rows. There we go. Highlight this. Why is it locked? Oh well, I'll delete it by hand because I'm savage like that. Let's see. Okay, this is to create. This is not what I care about. I would say SQL tool. I would say
you're underpaid, Odie. You know all this stuff, all these details about all these different integration components. Like, I feel like we should get paid like doctors.
I'm telling you, like,
but we're not held to the same standard as doctors, unfortunately.
True. And part of the reason I think so there are two things at play. Number one is impact and demand and supply. I think those are the two key things. Impact here is we have pretty much almost the same amount of impact that doctors do, in the sense that if we screw something up, we could really, hurt businesses, right? I know of so many businesses that have died because the what do they call it? Many businesses that have died because bad programmers wrote shitty code and made the business to lose money. So that happens a lot, even almost to the point of loss of life. There was this incident with Tesla. Do you remember? Where the auto what do they call it? Where the where the autonomous AI, right? The self-driving feature of it screwed something up in terms of it didn't see a trailer properly. And yes, I think it's just delete from. There's no delete star. Version info. This should be public.version info.
You didn't see a trailer and what?
And the driver lost their life. But again, it's not like it's the fault of Tesla, because they tell you that even if you're using the autonomous AI, you have to be alert and you have to have your but apparently the driver was sleeping.
Yeah, so I don't think that's Tesla's fault.
Yeah, it's not Tesla's fault, but the point is that what am I screwing up? This square bracket. I know square bracket is SQL Server. Ugh.
Well, when you hover over it, what does it say the error is?
Yeah, it's saying that the error is the Oh, I think I'm connected to the wrong database. Am I? No. I'm connected to the right database.
Square brackets whenever you use a dot or a qualified name or something. I don't know. I don't do SQL.
Let me run it again. Let's see. It's saying relation version info does not exist, but that's literally what I'm looking at here.
I don't miss stored procedures.
No, I have never liked stored procedures, and I don't think I will ever get to a point where I like stored procedures.
You're a bad developer if you like stored procedures.
Yeah.
People get upset. All right. You're a bad developer if.
Okay, I think I've seen the solution. So let's come back here, view and edit all rows. I select the row in question. I can't hit the delete button. Why is it locked? think it's locked because it has a composite key, I think. There we go. That should solve my problem. Let's head back here.
The stock market should be open today, right?
Yeah, it should be. All right, cool. So I have deleted that migration. All right. Wow, I thought I did. Apparently it didn't work. Let's see. Web version info equal to that. Let's see. Web version equal to this. Let's copy and put this here. And here, description equal to migration of 002. Put this here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this.
What's that? Oh, okay, this. Nah, it's fine. Probably my own screw up. You know what? I'm going to hawk this thing if it doesn't work again. All right, I'm done. Let's just nuke the database because I can. Nuke the DB.
What's your views on domain modeling?
What do you mean by domain modeling?
As in modeling the types as they relate to business functions. Like I noticed in the code that you decided to focus on, a lot of it is integration specific, instead of like business rule specific. Meaning that you're in the bowels of the details as they relate to integration details. So, for example, like when you register, when you call a register function, what's the result? Is the result a registered user? Is the result, and then once the user is registered, what can they do? Can they request other registrars? And if they do, what does that argument look like? Do they just pass themselves in as the argument, or pass in a submission that includes themselves that has to have a registered user in order for that operation to succeed? Or is it just a void request and it doesn't care if the person's registered or not? It's just, here it is. Like, so with me, I know it's a beat down, abused term, but I really do try to do the legal states unrepresentable. So like I try to implement business rules with policies where you can only invoke this function based on this state of the application's session, right?
Okay.
You have to be an authenticated user, right? Else it just won't compile if you try to invoke this specific operation. That's kind of what I mean by domain modeling.
I get what you mean. And okay, so here's my thought on it. I do believe there is such a thing as over engineering, right? So the question I always ask myself before knowing whether a particular abstraction is important or not is two things. Number one is what is the cost of this abstraction in terms of maybe performance, in terms of maybe this thing. But more importantly is that if the abstraction is not there, or rather if the abstract, what is the danger if that abstraction is not put in place? Does that make sense? So for example, all right, if you don't, I have to know whenever I make an argument for an abstraction, I need to know what the result of violating that abstraction will cost me. And knowing that enables me to make better trade-offs in terms of the way I build my system or the way I write my code. Let me give you an example. There was someone, I don't know if you saw this message on Twitter where someone said something like, he said something like that 99% of all projects can get away with two libraries.
Yeah, I
Just
remember
two,
that.
just two projects that
I
99%.
take it personal.
Yeah, and every other thing is ego or something like that. I don't know how he put it. And I now said, I did a pushback on that and said, no, it's actually three. And again, immediately I got railed on. Why should it be three? It should still be two. And I started giving examples of where I have violated that principle of having it to be at least three. I gave example after example of, okay, we didn't do this. This was the scenario that came up, and this is where it beat us. We didn't do this. This was the scenario that came up, and this is where, this is the price I paid because I did not follow this abstraction. Does that make sense? So in that light, right, before I incorporate a particular abstraction, I look at, okay, what is the downside of not doing it properly? And and I have to now do on a case-by-case basis to see, does that downside actually affect the project that I'm working on at the moment? What do I mean by this? The idea of having inconsistent states, irrepresentable or whatever, right, is a very good idea. And there are projects I can even show you. I wish I could show you my source code. I could show you source code where that is implemented. But those projects were far bigger projects. You were dealing with far more, complexities in the way the state is approached. Okay. In the case of this particular application, like, let's be honest, this application is not complicated at all. This application is literally a CRUD app. And I'm already feeling guilty that
I would argue it is complicated based on all the scaffolding and integration points that are in there.
Yeah. So to be honest, I'm already feeling guilty for that. Does that make sense? I'm already feeling guilty that it's already probably too complicated for its own good. So I try not to tack on even more complexity. However, that said, I'm a big fan of it. And in fact, it even still shines through in a way. So for example, if you come here, if we go to our managers, right? I didn't just say user here. I said login. Or I didn't just say user or whatever. I said register. So I still have individual types for specific kinds of states, such that you can't just call it with any state you like. But that said, another example of, do I really need an encrypted string here to represent that, okay, this password is encrypted password and this password is plain text password or something like that? Those are some of the things I just looked at and was like, you know what, it's no big deal. Now, that said, that's precisely what this async result is actually trying to solve. The async result encodes the fact that you are running, this is an asynchronous computation, and it can return an okay or failure. Either is it an okay or an error, right? So there is some of that here, but I try to make it as generic as possible just to reduce the amount of complexity, in it.
My policy is it's a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask yourself the question: am I really building a utility, or are there reasonable expectations that this quote unquote small project, if successful, is going to evolve with more features? And almost always when I'm asked to do something from a client, once it's delivered as a utility, they want to add more features to it. They want to take what was originally a utility, and now the additional requirements that they get based on the market requests, they're trying to convert that utility into a platform. And that, I think that's what happens is software, the more it becomes adopted, the more it's asked to perform additional favors that it wasn't originally designed to do. And so I like to program for it to be Legos. And for me, for it to be Legos, I rely on a strong type system. And I kind of rely on the compiler to enforce abstractions, and so like I come across a lot of people, and like we butt heads, in which they say, "Oh no, this is small," but I really don't think they've been bit with a successful project. And I'm not saying that you haven't delivered successful projects, but I'm just saying in general, like. Projects that are successful almost always evolve. And so like I feel like you have to do your due diligence up front, else you're setting yourself up for failure at the expense of your first success. I think that's nice.
Yeah, true. And to be honest, to be fair, right? Let's just go through a simple mental exercise with this project. Let's say that the original registration becomes successful, right? Let's say all of a sudden, we start getting 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 users, right? What is the roadmap? And let's say more and more features get tacked onto this. What is the roadmap for expandability? And like what you said is actually very, very valid. And I also think that way too, as well. And to be fair, in this application, I don't think I paid as much thought into the expandability as I should have. Part of the reason is, like I said, I've not even started writing any business logic per se, right? I just pretty much have, in other words, the code you're looking at here could be for virtually any project whatsoever, right? You have users, you want to create users, you want to do login and stuff like that. That said, because currently the extensibility is done on the client, and that's what makes this head scratching a bit. Yes, I do have here I do have a bit of what do they call this thing? I just have API endpoints, which in theory could be broken out into microservices of their own. Let's be honest. So say, for example, the application gets successful, right? What I would do is to come here, right? And then split everything under account into its own account microservice, right? Then split maybe payment into its own payment microservice, and so on and so forth. So even though right now they are all together, right, breaking them apart is trivial. Where it gets complicated is in the client side, right? Where it gets complicated is here. So currently, here's what I have. Oh my God, this is just a lot of code.
You need some active patterns in there.
Yeah, so ignore what you're looking at on this side. Let's focus on this side, right? So here you have the main application itself, right? And this main application has the init function, the update function, the view function, right? Let's go to the view function. I'll get back to these ones in a moment, but let's look at the view function. Now, in the view function, right, you have the view function renders the entire page. No matter what is being displayed at any given point in time, it is generated by this view function. This view function then delegates its work to smaller view functions. So we have the login view function, we have the home view function, right? These ones are located in this folder called pages. So I have different pages. I have a page or applications in quotes. I have an application for the home page. So this is the one that shows you that registration page and so on and so forth. So technically speaking, all the functionality with regards to the home page will be stored here. So for the login page, that's exactly what you're looking at, right? You have your login file in quotes. So you have your login view function, which renders your login page, and it's broken into three. So it's broken into the views. So these are the different views that I use. So I have a particular view for displaying errors. This one displays the form, and so on and so forth. And then you now have the update function, which is this. This handles the business process. No, not business process. This handles the flow, if you will, right, of the login page. So things like when you enter invalid data, log in, it giving you feedback telling you, okay, you didn't enter the right password, email address is required, password is required, stuff like that. And finally, the actual work itself. The actual work itself is just to call that endpoint. Keep in mind that this endpoint could literally be to a different microservice. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that even though I have everything assembled together, if this app becomes successful, the server side is straightforward. All I would simply need to do is break those out into their own microservices, right? And each microservice would be focused on doing a certain thing. However, on the client side is where the tricky aspect is, because now I have to have different pages essentially, which you can see some elements of that here. So that's, like I said, that's pretty much what is going on here. So if we go to state, for example, this is a lot. It's a lot to explain, because if you've never seen Elmish before, it's difficult to explain what each of them is doing. But the idea here is that the update function delegates to the update function of smaller of the sub applications. Remember what you said earlier about building it like Legos. That's literally what's going on here. So when I have a message for the login page, I pass it to the login page, and then the login update function now deals with the specifics of that, okay, and so on and so forth. So it's modular in quite a bit of ways, but I still feel like there's probably more I can still do to make this even cleaner, if you will. Okay. Yeah. So what do you think? So an idea that just popped into my head is, for example, I could have a subfolder, right? And that subfolder would be, so I would have a subfolder for each of the sub applications. So I would have an account folder, I would have a payment folder, I would have a registration folder, I would have a what else? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's the way I would do it.
Yeah. Then on the server side, right?
I would. The difference is, I would actually have that as its own dedicated library, because as Sean has said earlier, where did he say that? I thought he said it somewhere. 2 projects can work, but it's much harder to maintain boundaries. Is like, when I believe that when you have dedicated libraries, then you reduce the chance of accidental dependencies, accidental coupling, which ultimately leads to accidental complexity. And so
but you also have to remember, and this is really important, is that you also have to remember that F# as a language already puts in checks and balances to prevent that, right? So the fact that, so for example, the fact that you have compilation happening from top to bottom means that you can't mix and match layers the way you do in C#. You can't just have code referencing any kind of code it likes at any point in time. Right?
That's only okay. We're about to get into a debate now, but I'm ready, all right? Because what you said is absolutely true.
Yeah.
If the premise is, I'm going to write my entire mission critical system using 1 or 2 libraries, you're absolutely correct, right?
Yeah.
Now, if the premise is software engineering is about building and delivering value sustainably over time, right? If that's what the definition of software engineering is, then you would have to say that a huge part of that is code reuse, right? And it's not really code reuse if it only works in your application.
True.
Right? So that's the argument for having dedicated libraries, so that you are able to abstract away functionality that can be plug and play, like labors, in other use cases for other applications or other services. So that's where the argument comes from.
Okay, so let me throw my own counterpunch.
Okay.
Yeah. There's this channel I started watching, Counterpunch. That's what he says when he wants to report. But here's my argument against that: is that sometimes my experience has taught me that sometimes you cannot anticipate the boundaries of your domain upfront. You can't properly estimate those boundaries upfront. And or at least that has been my experience. And more importantly is the fact that when you are building a system for the very first time, it's okay to abstract out as many things as you want and say, okay, this will be its own separate library and stuff like that. But until you can provide a viable alternative use case, right? That abstraction is just has no value whatsoever. What do I mean by that? Let's say I have a class that does something, right? And I decide, no, I shouldn't be using this class directly. I should have an interface here that abstracts out this behavior, right? If I cannot think up an alternate implementation of that interface should not exist, because that interface has zero value and only ends up, it only ends up obscuring the intent behind the original thing. So somebody who's reading the application, who's reading the source code, has to deal with this extra interface that literally has only one implementation ever. Does that make sense?
That's assuming that you don't have automated tests, right? Whenever you have unit tests, right? Mm-hmm. Then if that behavior depends on, mm-hmm. well, if that behavior has a dependency, then mm-hmm. yeah, that's what the interface is intended for, right? And mm-hmm. so it's, I understand. I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, I feel like, what is the cost of programming in safety? What is the cost of programming in libraries instead of folders, right? Mm-hmm. When I say libraries instead of folders, you mm-hmm. can have dedicated libraries, which are their own DLLs, or you can mm-hmm. have one library that has folders. Well, how are you going to, one, scale or reuse that code for other components of the enterprise? And the answer is you don't. You have to refactor it. And so I think it's really, really cheap to choose mm-hmm. libraries over folders. I honestly don't understand why people don't do it. I don't understand what they believe the cost is.
So let me give you an example, right? Let me give you an example of something that you can kind of understand what I mean by before. Okay, let's take this application. Let's go a little bit specific. Let's take this login page, right? Now, this login page right here, believe it or not, actually meets your criteria. It actually meets your criteria of, let's say I want to have another login page. In fact, as a matter of fact, I think I stole part of this code, if not the entire thing, from an existing project I have. But let's say that I wanted to have I was building a completely different application and I wanted to reuse the login page, right? I can literally just take this login.fs. Like, that will work, because even looking at the hierarchy of the way the files are laid out, login.fx only depends on global.fs, and global.fs just has, okay, what your page configuration is and a bunch of encoders and decoders and stuff like that, right? And that's it. That's literally it. Now, let's say I created a new library called this library login, and I moved global.fs into that library, and I moved login.fs into that library. The question now is, the app is still the same. The app did not change. Everything is still the way it works, and so on and so forth. The problem is this abstraction, just cutting out the login page alone, is too low level that unless I'm building, okay, no, I think login is still an exception to this. Yeah, because imagine if someone comes along and says, okay, I want people to be able to log in with their username, right, as opposed to logging in with their email address, right? Then I still have to change the login page code. Now, if I wanted to walk around that, I could decide to say, okay, give people the ability to supply what string they use the first validator to be, and so on and so forth. But at that point, if I cannot come up with, as at the time I'm writing is right now, right, that is a lot of engineering for something that the use case is probably never going to come up, where I will now need to bring in a login module, then customize the login module. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I think we're talking about different things. One is, I don't think a library, this is my personal opinion, I don't think a dedicated library should include the different system layers, right? I don't think a reusable library has UI, the model, and operations all in it, right? I believe a library should either be UI, another library should be focused on the actual structure or model, and another library should be focused on operations. And that's it. It shouldn't be mangled with computer responsibilities. So
okay, so but then, okay, if that's what you're saying, then it doesn't apply to the UI code, because all of this here is UI code.
It's because of the architecture that you're using, I believe. So my understanding is your login.fs includes model, view, and update, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it is assuming that one file is assuming all the responsibilities of computer design. It's assuming the UI, it's assuming the model, and it's assuming the operations operations for state. It's having all three computer designs. And so I would say that, to me, that's a failure of the architecture. It's not meant for code reuse. If one file addresses three different system layers, you can't reuse that in other things. How could you?
So how would you do it?
I mean, I subscribe to, I use view models. I do MVVM, and I separate my UI responsibilities as a library from my operation responsibilities. And I have my language. I have a library called language, and that's just
okay, hold on. I think I see where we are missing each other, right? You forget that okay, let's take this login. The operations you talked about are not inside, it's not inside of this file. Does that make sense?
The
it's not,
update, because update is it's taking one type and it's generating another type. That's what I thought update was.
No, it's generating a view. Sorry. Yes, it's generating another type, but its goal, the goal of the update function here, is just to generate UI.
A model for my understanding
it's generating a new model that will get rendered to the UI. Exactly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's take a look at this. This is the only, you see this line here, this login user. This is the only operation here. And literally, I could make the case that it's just a function pointer, really, right? It's just calling this fetch command. The implementation of this logic is on the server side. Nothing in this code is related to business logic per se. Maybe the argument I could make is the validation, right? But this is not, how do I put it? This is just for, what's the word now? This is just for user feedback. The actual validation is still done on the server.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So what you're looking at here is just as far as I'm concerned, all of this is UI code, literally. Does that make sense? Or you wouldn't classify it that way?
It's not.
Okay. So how is it different?
UI code is code that only cares about rendering. It doesn't care about getting data. It only cares about rendering data. This file is getting data. It's fetching data and then it's rendering it. It's doing two completely separate functions.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. And so that might be the way you do things in model view update architectural pattern. I think it's flawed, right? It's not me attacking you. I think model view update is great if you don't want to reuse code. I think it does really well at that. I think yeah, I mean, that's just my current understanding or misunderstanding.
I think I'm starting to get what you're trying to say, but I'm not exactly sure if there's actually any viable alternative.
MVVM actually has a mediator. So you're familiar with your XAML file. It's code. It only cares about rendering. It has no clue how it fetches data. It doesn't care, nor should it, right? And then you have your mediator, right? AKA the view model, right? So this is where looking at my video because stuff is like switched around. But your mediator is responsible for, I would argue, people can argue against me, for taking whatever commands that are invoked on that view or your page layout, and it dispatches. That's all it does. It dispatches, right? Now, that dispatch you can actually implement a data gateway dot query, and then take whatever arguments, and it's going to return that result, and then that view model is going to mutate its properties with that result, and that's it. The difference is your model view update is one file that is rendering and fetching. It is doing both, and you can't. It's hard to make an argument that you can take that file and reuse it in other applications of the enterprise.
Okay. So should I? Okay. Let's go back to my screen, shall we? Because actually, that is a failure on my part, not necessarily the model view update pattern. So let me explain why, and let me actually do something that will help you understand what the mistake I made. So are you seeing my screen right now?
Let me click on it. Okay.
All right. Let us implement what you're saying. So if I'll right click here, because it's actually quite easy to do. Yeah, this is a waste of my time. I can click here, create a folder, new folder. Let's call this folder login. And then let's move quite a few things. We're going to create an update.fs. I like to call it state.fs. Right? And I'll create a view.fs. And finally, I will create the, maybe call this types. And I will head over to, let me head over to my client TS Proj, and I will make a slight change here. I'll include, because this, yeah.
I was going to say it's important to realize what the architecture of this is, and model view update. Correct me right now, but this, or should I say Elm, is focused on single page applications, right?
Yes.
That's it. And so it's maybe single page applications aren't really meant to be reusable.
Well, in a way, but yeah, just give me a moment. Let me see. Login / view.fs. Get rid of this, and then let me still leave it in there, right? Then I can move. Let's go back to login. I will move this to. Let me see. I'll move this 3. Move this 3 into state.fs all the way down here. Stop at this point. So head over to state, paste that here, and head over to types. Move this here. Here. Because again, and maybe I should be talking while I'm typing so that it doesn't get too boring. Here, what I'm trying to do, right, is I want to what I'm doing in essence is I am essentially trying to break apart this one file in such a way that it can actually be reused. So if I head over to views, I think views is the last block. Cut that, move here. Module login.views. Login.view, I guess. There we go. So if I come here, open types, that brings in all the types. Open format, that brings in my format. Open Fable React. Open. Yeah, let me not even waste my own time.
You're using Fsharp 5.0?
No, not yet. Fable React props, not yet. So if I go back to views, so should bring in all I need. Here we have model.login. It wants to know what type this is. Let's see. Why are you giving me?
There's a paradox for sysadmins. They don't want to update to the latest and greatest frameworks, which is weird because latest and greatest you would think would have bug fixes and performance enhancements.
No,
and it's a paradox because you would think they would be interested in bug fixes and performance and optimizations, should I say.
nah.
And so I was chasing a bug for 2 days because I had upgraded to Fsharp 5.0 and the iOS build agent was still stuck on version 4. And the compilation error, there was no way to decipher that it was a versioning issue. No way.
But you know, you should ever since. Okay, so I used to think that way too, right? Until I became like a engineering manager, right? And I had to make sure and ensure that certain services were up and running. And then I now realized one fundamental truth, you know, is that what was his name? Uncle Bob said something. He said that developers love change. You understand? We love change. We are the instigators of change until the change. But we love to change things, but we hate it when people push changes on us. So, like, whoever is, you know, not wanting to upgrade to .NET 5 and everything, right, is because they've been burnt on several locations, like me, for example. So, I understand why, you know, people aren't that enthusiastic about, you know, jumping in. Essentially, let me see. I think I should just open state here. Yes. Ooh, is this state.fs? Ah, okay, I see. Yeah, this will be login.state. This will be login.types, right? Okay. And why are you upset? Login message of objects. Okay, this will be login.
He's you say his name on Twitter, you might get shanked.
I know, but I don't know why people just assume that you know, software engineers should be the moral arbiters of everything good. That like somebody's software engineering doesn't say anything about their character as a person. You know, it got to a point I had to ask a question. I said, would you accept a PR from a convicted felon? Do you understand?
After I reviewed it.
If it's good, it's good. It doesn't matter who it came from, right? That should be the mindset, right? You won't say, because you have to understand that there are inventions we use today that were done by despicable people, right? So yeah, that his software engineering arguments are sound says nothing about his character as a person. So that I endorse certain things from a way of thinking doesn't mean that I endorse the guy's character. Does that make
No,
sense?
I get it. I think he's unfairly attacked for verbalizing what most people think, but are afraid to be attached by the lynch mob on Twitter. Simply
Yeah.
Lowell says iOS is not officially tested, supported. It's pretty much up to Mono to support it. Really? Because I mean, I would think that Microsoft is Xamarin.
Yeah, but
Microsoft is required. I mean, I understand the license is free, but like if Microsoft is Xamarin, like they acquired Xamarin, and Fsharp is .NET, right?
true.
.NET is not C#. I know that we have a hard time believing that based on how C# is treated compared to any other language. But .NET was really supposed to be languages that run on the CLR or Common Language Runtime. That was the vision of .NET. It wasn't the vision of .NET was not C# only, right?
You know something. The problem is that many people who, even in Microsoft, right, they don't fully understand what .NET is. Like, I know that sounds, that sounds self-serving, and it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn or something like that. But let me put it this way, right? I took a course from there was a course on Pluralsight on the .NET runtime by this guy, is it Bart Desmet, who happens to be working in Microsoft. And what became very, very apparent very quickly is that C# and .NET are two different things, very different things. The assumption that that .NET was designed for C# is actually false, because there are things that are part of the .NET ecosystem. There are things that are part of the .NET runtime that don't even show up in C# at all. Let me give you an example. Tail calls, for example. In F# we have this concept of tail calls where if you write a recursive function that calls itself as the very last instruction, then the compiler has a way of unwinding the stack and making it become what is essentially a while loop. Okay, that is not available in C# at all. It doesn't exist, period. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I thought you were mentioning tail call recursion or something like that.
Yeah, tail call recursion. It's built into the .NET runtime, but it doesn't exist in C#. That's just one example.
The construct doesn't exist in C#. It does exist in Missile, because that's what .NET is. Missile is the core language, Microsoft Intermediate language.
Yeah, so that Missile, or Microsoft Intermediate language, I think they've just shortened it to IL now. IL is the language of .NET, point blank period, right? So what we have are all languages that get translated to IL. Finish. IL supports funky things that you've never heard of. So for example, this feature in F# where you can use strings as the name of a class or the name of a type and all those kind of things, right? And the strings could have spaces in them.
Yeah, the double ticks.
The double ticks and that, yeah. That is a .NET feature that is not in C#. So if I gave you code that had those that had spaces in them, the C# compiler, in order to make it a little bit compatible, will go and add underscores or something. Have you ever noticed that before? Like if you try to reference an F# project, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you try to reference an F# project from C# and the F# type uses that .NET feature of being able to have like spaces in between the names of types, the C# compiler is like, what's going on here, right? That's just one example, and there are so many. If you go into, if you look into .NET more and more, you start to see things like that all over the place, right? In the sense that there are things that are built into .NET itself that has nothing to do with C#. period, right? So for example, the DLR, the dynamic runtime language, right? In C#, you can create an object and say dynamic. But behind the scenes, what it does is it uses an object. It casts whatever you mark as dynamic into object, and behind the scenes, they create like a C. Yeah, this is complicated. Behind the scenes, they create what is essentially the C# compiler, but at runtime, right? And that just compiles your dynamic calls into like C#ish object. So, or rather, when you do like a dot on a dynamic object, it calls into that library. There's a name, that's MS Colab or so. I can't remember the name of the library. It calls into that library, and that library has like a dummy C# compiler in it that is able to essentially give you the behavior you expect. Now, there are aspects of that dynamic runtime language that you can't really use from C#. You can't really affect from C#. You can consume it from C# using dynamic, but you can't create those kind of objects. You can't access those kind of objects and stuff like that. I think those things were built for stuff like Iron Python and Iron Ruby, for example. Those are the ones that use that dynamic feature of being able to dynamically generate properties on types and stuff like that. So
Visual Studio supports Ruby?
Oh yeah. .NET supports Ruby. So let me see if I can show you an example. Let's look for Iron Ruby.
Is Ruby still
Iron Python?
I think Clojure is the new Ruby, right? Now I know people are going to say no. That would be Elixir. No, what I mean is like a cult following. Like I think, like Ruby had a cult following, and I think they finally died. And I think Clojure is the new cult following. I understand Elixir. I understand a lot of Ruby developers that they probably, or maybe not a lot, but a significant number of Ruby developers migrated to Elixir due to similarities with the syntax and other things that I may not be aware of. But,
yeah. I think that happened. So this is Iron Python. Like I said, it's built on top of .NET framework. You can just run it as long as you have .NET installed. Just run the Iron Python executable, and you can start writing Python that talks to C# binaries and stuff like that.
No. Simply for Lowell says you can only write Iron Python or he says Iron Ruby to talk to .NET framework. He says .NET Core or .NET 5.0 isn't supported.
Oh wow! Now that I did not know.
That's what he says. So I don't know.
Yeah. It looks legit, I think. Yeah.
Simply for Lowell, where are you at? Are you in the States? Are you in Europe? Most Fsharp developers are in Europe.
Yeah, that's true.
Europe. Okay. I'm really good at stereotyping.
Anywho.
He's a part of the Fsharp compiler team, actually.
Oh, okay.
Hey,
cool.
You should hire Odie. I don't know if Odie's interested.
Nah, I'm not that good.
but you did some talks on the compiler or contributing.
But trust me, you have to respect those guys. Like, no, for real. Like, I dabbled into it. I was able to do some minor stuff on it, but no, you have to respect the guys that work on the Fsharp compiler. Like, nah, that is some software engineering right there. Like, if you want to look at like deep computer science work, go and work on the Fsharp compiler.
Well, that'll be Fsharp compiler too, though. That's any compiler, right?
True, but the Fsharp compiler is, in my opinion, even more advanced than the C# compiler. For real, like legit. For example, take something as simple as type providers, right? Type providers is essentially the Fsharp compiler giving people to extend itself. So what it does is that it can generate, it has like abstract representations of your code, and then it gives you the ability to load even more abstract representations before it compiles everything into IL. And oh no, I have like deep respect for anybody who works on the Fsharp compiler. Like, nah, I don't think like I already have enough. I already have enough imposter syndrome as it is. Yeah, that's like jumping in the deep end. So, doing CRUD apps, yeah, that's I have a lot of confidence with, but that, compiler construction and stuff like that, man, all my insecurities about my CS degree just just floats to the top immediately. So
What school did you go to?
I went to a private school here in Nigeria, Bessie Dawson University in Edo State, Benin. So yeah, we didn't really have the yeah, it was okay. We didn't really have great lecturers or anything like that, but it was a good school in the sense that if you're really serious about learning, right, it had a lot of all the tools you would need. We were given, very adequate books. We were given lots of computer time to be able to go to the lab and test things out and work on projects and stuff like that. We even won competitions in the country, programming competitions and stuff like that. So it was a good school, but it's nowhere near what you would get in something like a Harvard or a MIT or something like that. So, you learn. I think the importance of university is just knowing how to learn.
Well, okay. What's
Yeah.
I wouldn't know because I went to a commuter school. I went to Cleveland
Okay.
State University.
Okay.
What really is the difference between a Harvard or an MIT or I don't know, you name an Ivy League type school, their computer science program.
Oh,
What
I
really-
can tell you. Oh,
what
I can
really
tell you what the difference is. I can tell you what the difference is. So here's what the difference is. The difference is this. It all boils down to the quality of the lecturers. It has nothing to do with the quality of the students. It has nothing to do with the performance of the students. The only reason why you have top league people come out from Ivy League schools is just because the entrance into those Ivy League schools are so difficult that only the smartest of people go to those schools. So those people would have been smart either way. Take the Bill Gates, take the Elon Musk, take the people who dropped out of those colleges, the Mark Zuckerbergs, right? They were already smart. The school wasn't going to make them any smarter. Does that make sense? The only difference is, okay, they have higher quality lecturers because they can yeah.
I would argue that there's advantages of a school, not just the lectures with emphasis on office hours, right? But
Okay.
but relationships, right? The kind of like what you said, the type of people that get in, you have an opportunity to develop relationships with them that can carry over for decades, right? And usually most people either have hella money or in other cases they're minorities that are hella smart, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it pays to have relationships with them to pick
True.
their brain and also the relationships that they have. I mean, that again, like I didn't. The closest thing we have in Cleveland is Case Western Reserve. My cousin went there. He's really smart. I don't know what he's doing with his life, but yeah, IDK.
Okay. So, but long story short is so my sister, for example, she read accounting. She's a very established accountant, and she wanted to go into software engineering. So, she started doing research on her own, and she came across Harvard's course, CS50. Have you heard of it? Harvard has a free course called CS50,
Okay.
where they teach computer science to people who have no clue whatsoever. And when I looked at the materials, I was blown away. Not blown away in terms of that it was difficult or anything like that, but I was blown away in terms of the lengths they went through to explain certain things that we take for granted. So, for example, when I was taught binary search in university, right, we were just taught the algorithm. We're just told binary search is an efficient way of searching through data. It has the what do they call it? It has time space complexity of this. This is how you search through it. You take a data set that is sorted. First, you have to sort if it's not sorted. But if it's sorted, you take the data set, you check, you split it in half, then you check if the thing you're searching with is less than or greater than, and then you move over to whichever side. It was just taught in a classical theoretical perspective. But the way they were taught binary search in CS50 was they took a dictionary and the lecturer explained that this is why it is efficient, teaching it in a very visual way, such that anybody can get it, right? So, and I think that's part of the reason why the CS50 course is so popular, is because the pains that the lecturers went through to explain certain things in such a way that virtually anybody can get it. I think that was what blew me away when I saw the content of the course. Again, it could be one of those things where it's just what's the word now? It will be one of those things where they put in all their effort into that free material so that you will get into their school and then realize that it's just another shitty school like every other school. But I don't know. That may be the case. But I was really impressed with what I saw. And in fact, anybody who just tells me, hey, I made this, I want to get into software engineering, where do I start? I would recommend, the Harvard CS50 course. Like, I was just impressed with it. They start by teaching C, which is not the most pleasant of programming languages, but they do that on purpose. So when they frustrate you with C and you are exhausted and you're like, I can't take enough of C, they now teach you Python. And then you now realize that, oh, okay, this was hard because, C is a nonsense language. But more importantly is that I think C is the basis of most of the other languages that exist, the JavaScripts, the C Sharps, the Javas of this world. So them forcing it on you at that early, gives you the basis for you to pick any of these other languages I just mentioned. So it's what it is.
It was I forgot the formal name of the course, but it was compilers. Well, it was called Operating Systems and Compilers.
Okay.
I wrote the compiler in Visual Basic 6.0.
Whoa.
When I learned about, also in community college, we had to learn assembler.
Yeah.
I did not get that at all. Like push, pop, 16 registers, like four of them allocated for special.
The funny part of it was that even my lecturer in school didn't fully understand assembly. So what ended up happening was the examples he gave us during the course most of it was what came out in the exam. So he just expected you to just vomit exactly what he gave you and you pass, which kind of sucked because down the line, right, I started needing to understand how compilers really work. And that's what now led me down the rabbit hole of trying to, understand
G records.
Yeah, assembly, x86, and all those kind of stuff. So I had to learn that after I left school. And in fact, it was one of the reasons I took that course I told you. The name of the irony is that the name of the course is C# internals. But literally the course is about .NET, not necessarily C#. And he explained, how IL works, how, you have this virtual machine, how the virtual machine is stack based, and you push operands and you push maybe a function pointer and you get a result back in the stack, and all those other interesting stuff that comes with .NET and all that. But yeah, I had to learn compiler construction after the fact. I had to learn assembly rather than not even compiler construction. I had to learn assembly after the fact, after I'd left school, which is what it is. Yeah.
All right, simply for lulz. Catch you later. Thanks for chiming in.
Yeah.
Sean has said that there are teaching schools and research schools. The former teach better than the latter.
Mm, mm, interesting.
I was always under the assumption that at a university, lecturers are just supposed to regurgitate what you read in the book. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's a student's responsibility to learn from the book. That's what they paid $1,000 for. It's probably a couple thousand now for
Yeah.
textbooks. I used to get so annoyed when I was in college, man. I would no, because they wouldn't give me. Get this, my mother kicked me out of the house, right? But
Okay.
I couldn't get the financial aid that I needed because she was still claiming me as a dependent.
Oh wow.
So she put me out the house, right? I'm trying to
Mhm.
improve my future, so I go to college, and she's still claiming me as a dependent. And they're like, "Oh, your mother
Ooh.
makes $40,000 a year, so we this is how much we can give you." And so I remember spending like $800 for like textbooks, and like I'm literally like paying out of my pocket, working night shift, going to school, working
Wow.
for like nuts, like not getting paid that much. And then I'll see someone else in front of me, and like they get their books for free, covered.
Hmm.
And me stereotype because I went to school. My school was located in the projects, and so like
Hmm.
half of those people, they they're there for the first 3 weeks, and then they get their government checks for like $2,000, $2,500. The more kids
Hmm.
you have as a single parent, the more money you get for financial aid. Sometimes
Wow.
reward system. And I would watch all these people that would abuse the system, get their money, and just drop out. And like I was trying to like do the legitimate thing, and I'm paying out of
Hmm.
pocket. It used to frustrate me how much
Hmm.
the government took care of them and not me.
Wow.
So
Wow. That must really suck.
it did suck. I hated everybody. I couldn't stand my mother for doing that. Like, how you gonna kick me
Hmm.
out the house and still claim me as a dependent? And I can't get what I need.
Hmm.
Why is school loan forgiveness is a sham?
Oh man.
School loan forgiveness is not a sham, Sean. Right? Because I believe that when we graduate and we make more money, we pay more in taxes. And if we pay more in taxes, then I think that that is our debt to the government. The more taxes we pay, I feel like why do I also need to pay for my school loans? I'm already you're holding a gun to my head and threatening to kidnap me and throw me inside of a cage if I don't give
No,
you more money based on the money that I've been making, which is more if I didn't have this education. So it's
I
like,
even
hey, it's
I
twice
even
more.
no, I even think that no, this is how I think about it. I think that student loans, based on what I've seen, only benefits the universities. Let's be honest. The government gets screwed out, the students themselves get screwed up. It's just the universities it benefits. Because think about it, right?
Sean, come in here. Odie, I'm listening.
Yeah, because think about it, right? You are giving the okay, let me put it this way. The value of education, right? Because that's what all this depends on. The value of education, right, is kind of arbitrary. Okay. Of course, you could argue that okay, teachers need to be paid, and this is the number of hours they need to be paid, and so on and so forth, right? But if that were the case, all schools would have the same price, right? Because there would be kind of a race to the bottom for education. But that race to the bottom doesn't exist as it does with any other product. So, say for example, you are making pizza, okay? And I'm making pizza as well. Now, if I tell you that my pizza is $7,000, right? I could make the argument that says that, oh, my pizza is so well crafted, well arranged, and so on and so forth, that you have to pay $7,000 for it. Now, would you pay $7,000 for a pizza? Of course not, because you can always go down the shop and get an alternate pizza that pretty much serves your purpose. The problem now becomes if all of a sudden the government now says, you know what, pizza is free no matter where you buy it from. then all of a sudden I can specify any amount I wanted, and I can justify any amount because I know that people have the money to pay for it. Even though technically they don't have the money to pay for it, that money is still coming out of the government's pocket because it comes as a loan to the person who is spending that money. Does that make sense?
Okay.
You get where I'm coming from? So the way it should be done, right? How it ought to be done is that either it's one of two things. It's either the government owns the schools. Like in Nigeria, for example, we have government-owned schools. So the government is the one paying for the tuition, paying for everything. And then the students don't have to get a loan to pay back. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? Either you do it that way, or you just make it free for all, like private schools, right? If you have the money to pay and you feel like this private school is giving you the kind of education you like, then go for it. If not, don't go to that school. You're not compelled by law to go to any school. So I just feel like, am I making any sense? Is what I'm saying making sense to you?
I'm not really catching on, but I'm sure that's
So what all I'm saying is this: instead of the government giving loans to students, right, and then making sure that the students now have to pay essentially indentured servitude, right, to pay for the loan that the government gave them, why not the government gather all that money, create the schools themselves, and then the students will now go to those schools for free?
That's
Or maybe
called public school system. That's K through 12.
Yeah. So then why does the university have to be different?
Yeah, Sean said the same thing. Because it costs money, right? And maybe you're on.
Why does it? That's my point. Why does it cost money? Why does it cost astronomically more money?
Because people have invested time in relationships to get a certain level of understanding that others aren't willing to do, and they should be compensated for that if they share it.
I get that, but okay, let me put it this way. Let me put it in a way that makes a little bit of sense, right?
Before you say that, like, why should you or I? Why don't we make? Why shouldn't we make the same amount as a school teacher? So if a school teacher gets paid, I don't know what they get paid. Let's say $50,000 a year, right? And you and I, or if you worked in the States, you would be making, I'm sure, probably 140,000 or more. No, how come we all just don't get paid $50,000? And it's like, well, we always have to learn every single year. We're held accountable for delivering faster and cheaper. We have to stay up to date, and I would argue we've invested more time trying to understand how to deliver the best value. We don't, every single year, we just don't recycle a lecture or a lesson plan. It's, we have more responsibilities. People can argue with me. I'm not a teacher. I would be ignorant, but I feel like it's the same argument, right?
Okay.
But why things aren't free.
But my argument here is this: who is the college lecturer closer to? Is he closer to the school teacher, or is he closer to us, the professionals who produce something on a day-to-day basis?
I would say he's closer to the school teacher. He or she is closer to the school teacher.
Exactly. So that's kind of my point in a way, is that you don't expect to these lecturers. Yes, they. Okay, let's say there weren't any student loans, right? Would these lecturers still have work?
Yes.
Okay. But would they be paid the amount of money they are paid now?
I don't think they would.
Okay. So the question is, why can't people afford colleges? Let's start with that.
Because the rate continues to climb, and some people.
So here's my argument, right? Here's my argument in a way that will make sense. Let us remove the variables. Let's remove some constants, right? Let's try and think of this in as abstract as possible. Let us say that we were dealing with online courses like Pluralsight, for example, like, Udacity, for example, right? Why is it that Udacity, Pluralsight are cheaper than colleges, when I would argue that some of the people who teach in those sites or whatever are probably as knowledgeable as lecturers and still have to update themselves. They still have to update the course content. They still have to do everything that the university lecturer is doing.
Because the university has way more overhead to pay for to continue operating than those type of schools.
But that's kind of my point exactly, is that even with the overhead, right? It's night and day difference. I don't know if that makes any sense. Imagine one of these universities decided, okay, we're in lockdown. We want to have an open EDU program. We want to have an open educational program where people can come and do everything virtually, online and everything. But it's going to cost you $10,000. Just think about it. Do you think it would fly in today's modern age? You pay for a $10,000 course. Think about it.
Oh, it depends on.
So my argument here is the value.
If there's results from it, right? If people are graduating the program and they're making $100,000, and they used to like work at gas stations or at the stores, then I would do it.
Yeah. But my argument is that world has gone. That world where a college degree ensured that you got a high-paying job, that world has sailed. So the okay, let me not say that world has sailed. That world still exists, but only for a very, very small minority of people. Only for engineers and engineering, only for software engineering, computer science and stuff like that, only for doctors, only for just a handful of professions, right? Every other profession, it is almost, you're just going into debt if you go to school, if you go to college to study those things. Does that make sense?
Today,
because
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I agree, but I honestly don't think I could have been a self-taught developer. Maybe it's because I learned differently. I honestly don't think I would be able to pull that off when I decided to go to college. I think that if I wanted to be a professional programmer, and I guess I'm speaking for myself, there was no other way. I had already completed my associate's degree, right? I had an associate's degree in mainframe programming. That wasn't enough. It wasn't. I had to go through a university to appease the HR, because those were the gatekeepers. You had to have a college degree in order to get an interview. That's the way it works. It's not like that anymore if you have a portfolio. But back in my day, you couldn't get past HR without a university degree. An associate is not enough.
So I think we're starting to get, we're starting to head somewhere, in the sense that, so to a very large extent, is essentially HR practices that is essentially fueling the demand of college, right?
I didn't catch the last part. You said something demanded college. What?
Yeah. So it's HR practices that is fueling the college demand. That's the way I see it. Yeah.
I unpopular belief is I do believe that there should be gatekeepers in regards to the quality of developers, because we're held accountable. Even though we're not held accountable, we are responsible for how much money an organization makes or loses. I believe that we have a significant part of that responsibility.
True. I get that. I'm not saying, so here's my argument. I'm not saying that college should not exist, right? I'm saying that the way it is currently implemented in the US is just is too much. It's too expensive. So the way it's done in Nigeria, like I said earlier, is the government owns the colleges. So you still pay school fees, but you're not paying for most of that overhead because like you alluded to, right? The government, people getting educated actually helps the government because they pay taxes, and that is a way for the government sees the universities as a way to generate revenue in taxes in the future, right? As a way to improve their R&D, as a way to improve their science and technology. And that makes sense. So the government owning it means that they get to, spend the necessary money, you know, um, build all the infrastructure and everything. Now, students still get to pay school fees, right? But the school fees is now regulated by the government, which means they don't have to pay as much as. But then again, is it really good? But then in Nigeria, right, the government still leaves it free for all in the sense that you can decide you don't want to even be part of the whole government scheme or whatever. You can decide that, hey, I want to go pay for a private university and study there and get my degree there and so on and so forth. And then in that case, the private universities are competing with each other. So for example, if the school I went to was relatively cheaper than another school, Ibinedion, that was very close to it. And they were teaching virtually the same thing, but it was more expensive, right? So that school made a niche for itself being this, what do they call it? Like a school for elites, right? So elites would pay the exorbitant prices to go to such schools. Whereas the other schools, right, were all competing to give the most amount of value for the least amount of school fees, if that makes any sense. So if you remove that element of competition, right, then you end up with what you have in the US, where a school can say your college tuition is $20,000 and they don't have to justify it and you just have to pay because it's almost like, how do I put it? Okay, let's take Apple and Google, for example, right? So Apple and Google are like monopolies. So when they set the App Store price at $30, there's nothing you can do about it. If they wake up tomorrow, if both parties wake up tomorrow and say it's $50 now, there's really nothing you can do about it. Like, does that make any sense? But if there were more and more app stores, then some of the app stores would be able to come out and say, okay, we now offer, you don't need to pay any money to be able to publish your app on our store. And that could be a differentiating factor or something like that. Am I making sense with what I'm saying? I hope I'm not rambling.
It sounds like you're advocating for there to be more competition, but I mean, there's hundreds of. I'm not sure I'm sure there's over 100 universities. Is that not competition?
Well,
here's the thing. I can't recall exactly, but my understanding is college tuition didn't skyrocket until the government started creating laws to sponsor student aid. Once the government started writing checks to finance education, that's when universities started saying, okay, this is how much the education costs then. And they started increasing or inflating their costs. And my understanding is that's how things came to be what it is today, is government got involved and government started funding. And they took advantage of the government printing out money.
Okay. No. I think you're right. I think, I don't fully understand how things work in the US. I think you're right. I think you're right about that. I think
anything about health insurance.
Yeah, I think now that you mention it, it makes a lot of sense. I think the way it is in the US, the original structure is fine, right? where you have colleges all competing with each other. I think you're right. I think what caused the problem is not the current setup of colleges in the US. What caused the problem was the fact that the government started sponsoring it. So that inflated the supply, right? Sorry, that inflated the demand rather. So that now, and an inflation in demand will also trigger an inflation in supply as well. So you now have.
I don't think it inflated the demand. What it did was it.
Yes, now it inflated the demand. See, demand is how much are you willing to pay for something? Do you get? That's what the demand is. How much are you willing to pay for something? That's the demand.
I don't think that's what it did. When government got involved, it said, let me try to think of another example. You and I are programmers, right? We offer services. We compete with one another, and then the World Bank says that, hey, if you need software to be produced and you can't afford it, don't worry. We'll provide financial aid for any business to have software built by Scott or Odie. And so we hear that and we say, oh, okay. Well, our price plan has been updated. So because the World Bank is providing financial assistance, we no longer charge $100 an hour. We charge $200 an hour. And we know that the government is going to pay for it because it's taxpayers' money. They don't care what they do with taxpayers' money. And that's what happened is the university said, okay, well, here's our new price. Because they know it's covered. That's not demand. That's taking advantage.
No, that is precisely what demand is. Let me explain. Let's take PS5, for example, right? You just bought a PS5, right?
Yeah, it doesn't get delivered for like another month. But yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, like how much did you buy yours, if I can ask?
500.
Because I know, 500, right? So you bought it at MSRP, right?
Daniel, I don't know if that was racist or not, but whatever.
Okay, fine. So let's take the PS5 as a case study, right? Now, the PS5 is just a console, right? The company that made the PS5 said, this is how much the PS5 is worth, right? Based on bill of materials, based on the amount of R&D that went into it, and so on and so forth. They came up with a price that is reasonable to the company, $500. Makes sense. All well and good. Now, in the process of marketing, right, they hyped up the PS5. Like, people have been waiting in anticipation for the PS5. To the point that when the PS5 dropped, scalpers went and bought all the PS5 that existed, knowing that the demand of PS5 was far higher than the amount of the actual PS5 itself, meaning that people were willing to pay $600, $700, $800, $1,000 for the PS5. Do you understand? Demand is how much are you willing to pay for something. It's not how many exist. Because the moment people are not willing to pay that amount of money, the price will drop naturally. In other words, the demand reduces. So when the government said, hey, you want to pay for school, this school is $12,000, don't worry, we'll write you a check, we'll give you a loan so that you can pay for your school. They indirectly increased the demand for school. So that now means that people were now willing to pay $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $100,000, right, for education, which they previously wouldn't have been able to. So that was now justifying the.
I understand what you're saying.
You get what I mean? That's not justifying because if those government programs should stop tomorrow, what do you think will happen? What will happen is people will not be able to pay. And most of these universities will be empty.
It'll just be a whole bunch of rich Asians and white boys going to school.
Yeah. And once the schools are empty, the schools will be forced to reduce their prices. That's what's going to happen. That's the solution to actually the whole thing. Okay, that would force out the moment. Take the airline industry, for example, right?
No, airline would invest in the prison system because that would make a lot of money. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like the airline system in my country, for example, right, used to be pretty expensive and all that. But when Corona hit and people stopped traveling, prices crashed. I think that happened in the US as well, right?
Yeah.
ticket prices crashed.
One of my
Why?
friends said pay for a round trip from Miami to New York City for $50. Like,
For real.
I'm almost positive that $50 probably covers TSA, the security, and that's probably about it. I don't think it covers fuel or anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. So the question is, what changed? What changed was demand. When demand crashes like that, the operators will be forced to reduce their price because the overhead is there with or without the students. So if the students are not attending your colleges because your colleges are expensive, they will be forced to cut corners and reduce their price.
How much is cable in America now? Let me see. I don't know if people still watch cable in Nigeria.
Yeah, we do. We do. We have, although ours is quite cheaper. So let's see.
I
Ours
just
is called
Disney Plus. I like it. So now I got Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and Netflix. I'm okay. So I think that's like Amazon Prime. You get a lot of things, but
so in Nigeria, what we have is something called DSTV, right? And let me see. DSTV is let me see. What's the pricing on this?
it's still like $45 to $75 here in the States for cable. And it's like, why are you paying? If it's not on demand, why are you paying to watch something that you don't have a choice in because it's happens to be playing at this specific time? Like I
Yeah,
knew.
true.
I mean, I hopped on the Netflix wagon like probably 10 years ago, and I knew that it was going to destroy the market.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see.
Man, so I watched the first episode of Mandalorian, however you pronounce that Star Wars series.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed. There's so many things I noticed about Star Wars. One is, I don't know how much you're into astronomy, but
Yeah, I know.
when I was watching that episode, it had dawned on me. You know how like the fighter ships, like the Galactic Empire, they have like this screaming sound, but like in space, there's no noise, right?
True.
So like a lot of things dawned on me of like this doesn't make sense.
Well, I will say that first of all, you see Star Wars movies, you see Star Wars in general, right? Is an echo of a distant past. It's an echo of the 70s. So the reason why you watch it the way you watch it now was because in the 70s, those were how sci-fi space operas were done. So even look at Star Trek as well, same thing, where they just landed on a particular planet and they could automatically breathe the air on that planet and they could just move around and do things, you know. Yeah, it's one of those things where you just have to suspend your disbelief.
They're just walking around with a spaceship. They're not
Yeah.
thing. It's like
Yeah, you just have to suspend
now
your
it's like, I don't know. I guess that's just a testament of how geeky I am now, since I have a better understanding of the constraints for space.
Yeah.
So now I watch it and I can't really enjoy the show because I'm too busy nitpicking all the false issues, all the issues with reality. So
yeah, the funny thing is that people there don't really notice. People who have been following the series for that long, right? It's things that we just take for granted. We don't even see it anymore. It's the newer people who are coming into the series of Star Wars who see such thing and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?"
yeah.
So what I was saying about cable in Nigeria is we have this thing called DSTV, and it's essentially $50. Let's say 48. Let's say $50 a month, and what it does, I don't know if that's the same thing with cable in America, but what it does is it can pre-record shows for you, so you can just you don't even need to know the shows up front. Right? You don't need to sit down and say record. They just keep a catalog for you. Then you can just log in, which is pretty much Netflix. You can just log in and just select the particular movie you want to watch and watch it directly. So in that case, it's not that different from Netflix, really. It can also download shows over the internet as well. So
It's that expensive. I didn't
Yeah.
think. I didn't think you guys made the same wages we made.
how? I don't understand.
Oh, well, $50 a month to watch television is expensive.
Well, that's the reality we have here. Yeah.
So
So,
this,
but
that's
it
slight.
has so it has different plans though. So the plan that I use is this one, right? It has plans as low as, let's see. Let's take this 1,850. This is really cheap, but this is like 40 of the basic channels. I don't think this has even channels you even like. But let's see.
I mean, if it's not Discovery Channel or the Learning Channel
So let's see.
or
So
A&E,
so this is like $5 a month. Yeah, this one is like $5 a month. But yeah, this one doesn't really have the channels you really want to watch, like sports and stuff like that. I think something more reasonable is in between compact and compact plus. This is what most people pick. One
Do
of
y'all
these
have-
three at the top.
do y'all have BET?
Yes, I think this has everything. So yeah, we do have BET, we have CNN, we have many of the US channels, right?
Like, how come
American.
there's no WET? I'm like, that's every channel.
True. So anyway, these three are what most people use, and it ranges from like 8,000 naira, which is, let's go to 8K. It ranges from just say from $20 and above, right?
Okay.
So yeah, that's pretty much that. Okay, let's go back to what we were discussing. I know we took a long tangent, but I was trying to explain something about we were talking about reusability in software, right? And I was saying that the MVU architecture itself, I think, is pretty reusable. So if you think of Vue as your XAML, right? Think of state as think of update in particular as your view model. See your view model here? Not really. It's not really a view model per se. What would be view model here? No, there's no view model. But if you think of view as your YAML file, right?
The view
Your
model,
XAML file.
the
Yeah.
view model would be the update, right?
I would even argue that even the view model isn't the update, because the update here, right? Okay, yes, you're right. The view model will be the update. Sorry, yeah, the view model will be the update, because this guy is responsible for handling the events or the bindings, if you will, right? The events of what's going on. And yeah. So, but one of the cases, let me make the case why I said that this is very reusable, is that, you see, this login folder is a separate application unto itself, and it can be mounted on any other application, if you will, So for example, we have one where I currently work, Edelweiss Connect. We have this application called Edelweiss Data, and it essentially has like different components in it. You have your dataset selector. You can pick a particular data set and you can see breakdown of the data with description and everything. Everything you see here is built with what do they call it? Fsharp Elmish, right? Now, what we did, the beauty of what we did was we were able to make each of these its own application itself. So that now meant that we could reuse it. So for example, I can show you, let's go to EU Talks Risk. I can show you a different application where we reuse the existing components we built, right?
Most of you guys are using the .com instead of like the country suffix.
I
Like
think
in Canada, you have .ca. I'm sure.
yeah, but com is just commercial. So it's a commercial company, so it doesn't really.
Amazon in Canada is like .ca, right?
Oh, okay, I get what you mean. What can I say? The part of the problem is that it's not a problem. Part of the reality is that, for better or worse, the US determines a lot about the US determines a lot about about the world in a way, and it's part of the reason why Americans don't really know any other place other than America. They feel like the whole map is the whole world is their country. But part of the reason why that is because, for better or worse, many countries look up to the United States. And that's part of the reason why your politics is world politics. Your musicians are world musicians. Your software is world software. Your operating systems are world operating systems. So uh, the rest of the world is just finely acutely aware of what goes on in America, whereas Americans are oblivious to what happens everywhere else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the biggest surprise or marvel I never ever thought it would happen was America taking leadership in electronics. So
Oh
specifically,
yeah, yeah.
like I always thought that like the Japanese were like aliens from another planet, and they had all these advanced technologies that they decided to share with planet Earth, like
Mhm.
the PlayStation, Nintendo, and then like once Steve Jobs dropped the iPhone,
Mm.
they destroyed Japan, man. Like I mean, people can argue with me, but like I don't think people look at Japan for mobile electronics anymore. Like, are
Mm.
they a player? Maybe, but like America pretty much in 2008 just dominated everything that we knew about. So
I think you're wrong, and
okay.
you're not going to believe it, but I
You
think you're
think
wrong. I
the
think
Japanese are still a electronics leader? Because I don't think they are.
it's not the Japanese anymore. It's actually the South Koreans.
Okay,
Listen. Hmm?
you're
What
talking
Steve
about
Jobs
Samsung.
See what Steve Jobs did. Steve Jobs took yes, he saw the Japanese were doing their thing, but um he realized that the actual powerhouses of okay, so let me put it this way.
Well, what time zone are you in, real fast?
I'm in +1.
Okay.
So that's why it's 5 p.m. I'm in +1. So what he quickly realized was, oh, okay, the Japanese are very advanced and everything, but Americans did not need to know every little detail about the technology in order to compete. And that's where Steve Jobs actually made the difference, which is he figured out, okay, Apple as a company, we can create laptops. We don't need to know exactly how the silicon is produced. All we simply need to do is design the high level components and market the hell out of it, and so on and so forth. That's where his innovation comes in. But in terms of the technology itself, right, that has shifted from Japan to South Korea. So, for example, South Korea, this is South Korea and China. Those two countries, if they were to just vanish and vamoose, right? Let's assume that they did not exist, like they were just wiped off the face of the earth. You would not get any significant electronics for the next 20 years, if
Well,
I'm even being generous.
correct me. You
Because
you wouldn't get cheap electronics.
you wouldn't get electronics, period. That's where, listen,
You're
listen,
taking
listen,
you're taking for
listen,
granted what the United
listen,
States
listen,
produces.
listen,
It may
listen,
be
listen.
more private sector, like
Let me explain. Let me
okay,
explain. What's the most advanced part of most electronics? Is it battery tech? Is it CPUs? Is it let's just say CPUs in particular, right? CPUs are built by fabs because the circuitry in CPUs are so freaking tiny. You need microscopes, electron microscopes, to even be able to see what's there, right? It's designed by special fabs. Where are these fabs located? They are located in Taiwan, TSMC. They're located in South Korea, Samsung. They're located in China. You understand what I'm saying?
Chip manufacturers is
Yeah.
Intel and it's not ARM. Who's the other chip manufacturer?
That's what I'm trying to explain to you. The chip manufacturers. See,
And it's
Intel.
not microscopes, it's nanoscopes now. But yeah.
Yeah. So it's Intel, and you have TSMC. You have Global Foundries. You have quite a few others. But Intel was the last American company, and of recent, Intel has been totally dominated. Right? They can't even compete anymore in terms of chip making. All Apple products is built by TSMC. Even the latest iMacs with the M1 chip and everything. So Apple can come out and say, oh, we made the M1 chip. No, they didn't. What they did was they designed the circuitry of the M1 chip and handed it over to TSMC, who used their fab and their process and their engineering skills to bring it to life. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Same thing with Samsung, right? One of the reasons why Samsung is just killing it is because they own virtually the entire stack from top to bottom. We're talking chips, we're talking design, we're talking the radios, we're talking the antennas. There's a reason why for 5G, a lot of the equipment of 5G was Huawei. Huawei is a Chinese company. There's a reason for that. It's not American technology anymore. I would argue that the only American technology you guys have left is probably Tesla. Let's be honest, right? No, it's true. It's true. Like Tesla is superior. Don't get me wrong, right? Tesla is in another planet. Tesla. Okay, no. Let me rephrase that question. American technology, right, is superior in the case of Tesla, and military in the case of guns, weapons, all this kind of stuff. You can't even come close. America has more ammunition than Russia and China combined. Do you understand? So
I'm not sure about that.
What in terms of military?
You're confusing budget with assets.
Oh, okay, fine. But still, America has some of like the most advanced technology. Part of it is, the fact that you are allies with Israel, and Israel makes some of the best weapons of war. So,
Daniel actually has a good point, though. I'm not sure if you agree with it, but
okay.
And maybe I'm not saying it correctly, but maybe the innovation or the design is U.S. design, and then it's handed over to other countries to manufacture. So it's like the leadership and the decision making. The again, innovation is in the States, but then the orders to produce it and to make it happen, that's done by other countries.
I think that's not totally representative of what is at stake here. Let's put it this way. In a way you understand. Let's take what we do, right? We are software engineers. Imagine if Microsoft was a Korean company, right?
Well, they're an Indian company, but okay.
Yeah, so Microsoft is providing all the building blocks, right? No, what I'm saying is Microsoft is providing all the building blocks for us to build applications on. Yes. Of course, I would design my payment platform. I will design whatever I want to design on top of those building blocks. It doesn't change the fact that the building blocks was designed by Microsoft. Does that make sense? The only difference is that I'm able to compile and build it locally on my machine. But imagine if you wrote .NET code and you had to ship that .NET code back to Microsoft, and then Microsoft in their lab would now generate binaries, executables, and ship it back to you. That's literally what happens in the manufacturing industry. So TSMC will come out with a new process for creating silicon chips. They will say this is 5 nanometer, right? Or whatever, the one they use for the M1 processor. This is 5 nanometer. This is the building blocks you need to be able to build a 5 nanometer. This is the abstractions you need to know in order to build a 5 nanometer chip, right? Then Apple will take that and say, okay, fine. You've given us the basic building blocks. Okay, let's create a modem. Let's create a this. Let's put this. Let's put this. Let's put that. Let's arrange it. Let's try and improve the efficiency and everything. And then they will come up with a schematic, right? That schematic, Apple can't produce it. Like literally, they can't. They can't even produce. Intel has tried to see if they could. Intel is stuck at 14 nanometers right now. Intel is the American company, and they've not been able to go anything below 14. You understand? So Apple now takes that design, hands it over to TSMC. TSMC takes that design and translates it into into a physical representation of the final chip that will be manufactured. That physical representation, does that make sense?
It makes sense. Sean says what you're saying is that the United States isn't a leader in manufacturing anymore, which it isn't. Yeah. But I would say United States is a leader in engineering, which is separate from manufacturing. Or no? What is the difference between engineering and manufacturing? Engineering is thoughtful thinking of a sustainable design, right? I mean, I can't think of a better definition, but we hand off the schematics, the whatever, for other people to manufacture.
Yes, but I think so this is why I'm pushing back against that. I think there is a lot of I think we are overselling the importance of what American companies do. Let me put it this way. Even though yes, Americans have some of the best engineering, that is not a lie, but it's part of the reason why you have Chinese knockoffs in the first place, is that engineering, even though important, can be easily replicated, and they do it all the time. It's one of the reasons why Apple and Samsung are still locking heads with each other, because the moment Americans were able to innovate and say, okay, what if we did an operating system, blah, 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 and we get an iPhone, it didn't take long for Samsung to be able to produce a clone of it, right? But the reverse, but the reverse is almost impossible, right? So the reverse is Intel trying to make 7 nanometer process. They can't, right? Or rather, they've tried and failed multiple times. Do you get what I'm saying? So I'm looking at it from the perspective of what is more valuable is what is more difficult to replicate. Is the engineering more difficult to replicate, or is the manufacturing more difficult to replicate? And again, it's a false dichotomy, because engineering has different layers to it, right? There is the high level, and so for example, software engineering is an example of engineering that is high level, hand wavy. It's high level. So you have the software engineers, then you now have the hardware engineers, then you now have, let's say, the electronics engineers, and down the line like that. So there are multiple levels of engineering before you have something as complicated as the iPhone. So, but the question is, which level of engineering is easily replicated, right? Because that's what really matters at the end of the day. Which level of engineering can you do without? Okay, can you easily replicate? So my point is, if there were no computers, right, the work you and I do is pretty much useless, right? So if we were to rewind the clock and they took you back in time to a time when computers did not exist, there's literally nothing you can do. Like, all your knowledge, your skills of software engineering is pretty much pointless, right? I don't know if you're following my train of thought, or if I'm just rambling. So
I mean, everything builds off of abstractions, but yeah.
Exactly. So is the people who build the lower abstractions that I feel.
Sean says you're wrong. He said you're dead wrong. He said you don't know what you're talking about.
All right. So
are you looking at the comments?
I'm not looking at the comments. Let me see. Let me see. Okay. Manufacturing IP is just as replicable. Sadly, working change. I really disagree.
IP as in intellectual property, right?
I really disagree with this. If it was just as easily replicable, then why the hell is Intel still stuck at 14 nanometers? Can you explain that? It's just because they can't. They've tried multiple times, trying to build, 10 nanometer process.
It says
The rest,
his argument is because they can do it, but because of
because they respect intellectual property, right?
Yeah, that's his argument.
Hmm.
His argument is it's been soft. Go back to your economics. Why is he being mean?
Nah, no, it's fine. If someone in the US wanted to do it, they could, but they can't do. That's my point. Like, see, again, supply and demand, right? If it were easy for Apple is willing to pay incredible amounts of money to TSMC because very few companies, in fact, I don't think there's any company at the moment that can change, but I don't think there's any company at the moment that can compete in terms of, that can compete in terms of manufacturing process with TSMC at the moment. It's just what it is, right? It's to the point where AMD is now running laps around Intel because they are using TSMC's technology. It's what it is. It's either we accept it or I don't know what to say. But see, I get the idea that yes, they respect intellectual property, but you don't need advanced, how do I put it? You just need to, if you understand how something works, you don't need to fully copy it in order to replicate it. Does that make sense? I don't need to look at your entire source code to get, if I really know how to build programs, know how to build systems, I don't need to read your entire source code in order to be able to replicate it. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah.
So if I know that, okay, so for example, who started FinFET? I think it was Intel. Yeah, the new MacBook could be a really big problem for me. It's already a problem for Intel. It's already a big problem for Intel because one of the reasons why Apple decided to go with their own silicon is because they realized that, look, Intel is not going to make it. We've managed for how many generations now, and they have kept trying to move to 10 nanometers, and it's just not possible. Because when you're dealing at that level of engineering, I think we're talking nanometers here, very, very tiny distances, meaning that your engineering has to be, for you to get the kind of yields that make sense, right? Your engineering has to be superb. You get what I mean? And right now, it's just TSMC that has that superb engineering. It's just what it is, That doesn't mean that it's going to be like that forever. That doesn't mean that it can't change. That doesn't mean that American companies can't compete. It's just that is what it is right now. It's the same way America had like some of the best manufacturing, let's say 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and other countries simply could not compete. Fine, Americans could bring out, the schematics and say, okay, this is how we did silicon chips, for example. But it didn't stop the fact that, okay, let's take Intel for example. Intel became Intel precisely because of what I'm saying. Because as at the time they figured out how to do silicon chips, the rest of the world were left in the dust. And America enjoyed that, or what they call it, that lead for several years. But that lead has gone. That lead has evaporated. And, it may remain like this for a long time, Personally, I'm not a fan of China. I know by the time you post this thing online, I'll probably get my visa revoked if I ever apply to go to China. And that's okay because, yeah, I don't. Let me put it this way. America is like the bully that plays fair. Does that make sense?
They're the bullied what?
The bully that plays fair, or that has a reputation to uphold. China doesn't have any such things, right? They are not as big as America, but they are ruthless in ways that gives me the shudder. So right now, a lot of countries, even Nigeria to a large extent, right? We've benefited from the generosity of the United States, right? We've benefited from the generosity of Europe, and there is no way in hell we would have gotten the kind of support we've gotten if, say, a China was leading. Does that make sense? So
yeah, but I think there's a lot of things that China is doing. There's a lot of things that all these major countries are doing that we're just not aware of, and we won't be aware of until conflict occurs. So I think there's a lot of things we don't know about. No one really knew about the atomic bomb until it got dropped. Right? Seriously, that's a really good example of what we don't know.
True. But I will say though, like I was before I got into the tangent, right? That America, in terms of what Tesla is doing, right? I think Tesla is by and large 10 years ahead of whatever any car manufacturer is doing, right? It's just what it is. Again, by now you should have had, if it was that easy to copy manufacturing IP, there should be so many clones of Teslas, moving around the street, or so many clones that would be able to match what Tesla is doing. But it's simply not the case. Simply isn't the case. So, especially battery technology. Battery technology is another area where America is just ahead. Period. Right? Yeah, that's what it is, though.
I would just say Tesla is ahead. I know, like, I continue to harp on it, but I remember, like, I was watching a rocket launch, right? A SpaceX rocket launch, and it was their Starship, and it had blew up when they would try to reland, but I guess they were testing it. That's the whole purpose of test, is to figure out where its limits are. And me and my girl started talking about, like, Tesla and Elon. I was like, "Yo, how's that for an African?" And she looked at me, and she's like, "That's not right. You need to stop saying that." I'm like, "Saying what?" I was like, "This dude, he's South African, and he's produced this much value, and he's doing, like, relandable rockets. I mean, I know he's not the engineer doing it, but he's the one that spearheaded it." She's like,
"Yeah,
Elon Musk is African?" I'm like, "Yeah." It amazes me how many people don't realize he's African. Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I say, like, how's that for an African? Like, I'm like, yo, I'm pretty proud. I mean, his skin color is kind of different from typical Africans, but, like, yo, he's a product of South Africa, and he's doing this, right? And it just amazed me how many people didn't know he's African. So
I think part of the thing with him is that his accent is pretty much American right now, so you can forgive them for not knowing, and he's African, and I'm pretty proud of him too, because we need more stories like that, to be honest, and I think, and this is my argument. Okay, so I saw this. They really nailed it with the Cybertruck. Yeah, I agree. I like the Cybertruck a lot. Which ever see the movie Ford versus Ferrari? Nah, I've not. Anyway, like I said, I think that part of the reason we don't see much of that is because my country, Nigeria, which happens to be like the most populous black country in the world, is really nothing to write home about. If we were able to get our shit together and start, competing and, producing stuff and all that, I think that would also elevate the status of black people in general, right? Because believe it or not, you remember this movie Coming to America?
They're coming out with part 2.
Yeah, but do you know that the concept was based on Nigeria? Are you aware?
No, what country were they referencing? Zamunda?
Yeah. It's based on Nigeria. And part of the reason was after the British left the country, right, the country was very, very successful. Like we had all the raw materials, everything was working well, to the point where I think it was like maybe 1.5 or 2 Nigerian £2 to a Nigerian naira. Yeah, I still see commercials that were done by like foreigners in my country. The country was doing well until the first coup toppled the government, and it has been steady decline ever since. So it's one of those things that the idea that, oh, and then because I remember I have like relatives who said, you go to different countries and they respect you because Nigeria was very rich. Nigerians were very rich as well at the time. And coming to America, the whole idea of a king of Zamunda that came to America and was just his son was just blowing money anyhow and stuff like that.
So here's the pattern.
Yeah.
China, Russia, United States. What do they all have in common?
I don't know. I know US and
I would even say Australia. What do they all have in common?
Nuclear weapons? I don't know. Yeah, they do. They all do have nuclear weapons, but what?
That's a symptom. Sean or Daniel, what do they all have in common? Vast land masses with resources. Exactly. They're all of them have a huge expanse, if I'm using that term correctly.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I'm saying that is I look at continental Africa like I look at continental South America. And I even look at Western Europe, and it's just a whole bunch of fragmented boundaries drawn by white people centuries ago. Maybe not centuries ago. But just imaginary boundaries that were just drawn, right, and have been accepted during colonization. I can't say the word. The reason why I mention this is like, what would be holding back continental Africa? What would be holding back Western Europe? What would be holding back South America from like getting rid of these imaginary lines that were drawn by other people that don't look like you, right? Like, and I think I know the answer is wars have already occurred. Divisions, tribes have been dictated by Europeans outside. Like, I feel like those are the people that probably contributed the most to tribal differences. I could be wrong. I don't live there. But like, what if you talk about like if Nigerians could get their act together, or the Nigerian government can get their act together? Well, what's really holding back a new world order for continental Africa or continental South America? Like, why can't we get rid of these imaginary boundaries that were drawn by people that look nothing like the people that live there or inhabit those places?
Do you know the last person that came up with that idea?
Malcolm X, Gandhi, who?
Gaddafi. Gaddafi was the last person who was serious about that idea. And we all know how he ended up. There's your answer.
So it's just divide and conquer.
Yep. Gaddafi was the one who came up with the idea of, why can't we just have a unified, similar to how you have, is the reason why the EU exists. Let's be honest, right? Yeah. Because each of the individual countries in the EU doesn't stand a chance, right? But as a unit, they can dictate, they can at least weigh in on world policy, right? Gaddafi came up with the idea of saying, why can't African countries just form a unit so that we can at least pull our own weight, right? You can still have individual states, nation states, but what they call it, our commerce will be unified, our currency will be unified, similar to exactly what we have in the EU called the African Union. All of what I said is well and good, but the moment he now mentioned that, okay, we would now, pool in all our resources in terms of oil together, all of a sudden the US was like, hell no, This we can't have that. We can't have that. You get. So he came up with the idea of saying that there would be like an African version of OPEC that would dictate policy on Africa with respect to what do they call it? With respect to oil producing nations in Africa. And because Libya was very powerful because of oil. To a large extent, Nigeria is, even though our government has just been squandering it. But, you know, so I'm saying this to say that I don't think that people haven't thought about it. I just feel like the structure of the world as it is as a result of, you know, the end of the Second World War, right? I don't think that, you know, the powers that be, the US, the Russia, the EU, want anything to shake that to shake that system that was built. Does that make sense?
I wonder if that's the argument of North Korea. I wonder if their argument is, in order to have more influence and reduce the chances of invasion, that not only do they need to have a nuke, but they also need to unify the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah. So
you think about the Civil War, right? You think about the American Civil War, and you know, you had some of your southern states. Of course, obviously, I can't name them, but I'm sure Georgia's in there. I'm sure Alabama's in there. They're like, yeah, we're going to secede. Lincoln's like, secede? Oh man, it's supposed to be from like east to west. What are you talking about? Y'all just going to secede? F that. Go to war. Y'all ain't leaving us. So I mean,
yeah, we had something similar here as well. So Daniel asked a question. He said, "Are you from Abuja or Lagos?" Technically, I'm from neither of them, right? So this is one of the things that is different between, say, Scott, who's living in the US, and myself. Technically, I would have answered yes, I'm from Lagos, but it's just different here. So, for example, in America, if you stay in Detroit, right? If your family house is in Detroit, you've lived in Detroit all your life, you could say, I'm from Detroit, right? But in Africa, that doesn't really apply because we can trace back our history all the way back to 200, 300, 500 years. So where you're from is where your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, all the way back are actually from, right? So technically, I was born in Lagos. I've lived in Lagos. I grew up in Lagos. I'm just pretty much... So if in the ideal world, I would say I'm a Lagosian, I'm from Lagos. But technically, I'm not, right? So I'm actually from a state called Anambra. It's towards the southeast of Nigeria. So Lagos is in the southwest, and Abuja is in the middle of Nigeria. So technically, I'm from Anambra, but, you know, for all intents and purposes, I'm from Lagos. Does that make sense?
What tribe do you claim?
Yes, I'm Igbo.
Igbo?
Yeah, so Igbo is southeast. Yoruba is mostly southwest. Hausa is north. So you mostly north, just up north. So essentially what happened in the US, where the South wanted to secede from the Union, same thing here. We wanted to secede from Nigeria. We wanted to form Biafra, and Nigeria was like, hell no, and we went to war. And you know what was funny was that the Nigerians were so confident about their abilities that they were like, we'll just defeat the Igbo people in 3 months. It'll be all over. And it lasted 3 years. 3 years of brutal fighting. So you see all these, I don't know, you've seen all these adverts where you see they hold a starving African child and say, oh, this child is starving in a war-torn area, blah blah blah. You've seen those adverts, right? It started in my country. It started with my people. So so yeah, it's what it is, Sha. But long story short is, yeah, like I said, I can tell you my genealogy all the way back to 400 years. You know,
I can't.
like, yeah.
You
The
know,
truth is,
my nose is different, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
people say I have a European nose.
Mm.
I've been told that like my great grandfather is Italian,
Oh,
but that's all. I can't go past like my great grandparents. Like I
mm.
can't. So I don't know, what does that mean? Is that 2, 3? I don't know if that's 3 or 4 generations back. I can't go back. I have no
Yeah.
clue. I had one person say that I look like I descended from like Somalis. Like I've never heard that. And I look at
No,
Somalis and I don't think I feature them at all. I'm not disrespecting.
no. You don't look like them. I've seen what Somalis look like. No, you
Yeah,
don't. You
they
don't.
all like. It's weird how you can tell a Somali. It's weird because when I'm in Toronto, they have a lot of Somalis there. It's
Mhm.
weird, their facial features. It's like, damn, y'all don't mix at all. Like,
No. One thing that people don't. One thing that many white people don't understand is that there are more variations between black people than there are variations between any other race, right? That's how they know that. That's how they know that we all descended from Africa, because when you check the mitochondria, that's what they do. So, for example, you and your dad share the same mitochondria. So, if they want to know, like maybe after every 10, 12 generations, there will be slight changes in the mitochondria, right, for men and for women. And in any population, right, in any group of native people, the difference in mitochondria is very, very low, right? Because those people are all related one way or the other.
okay.
But in East Africa, right, around that Kenya, Somali area, you have the highest density of differences between mitochondria. Does that make sense? So, yeah, so that tells you that there are more variations between black people than there are within other, they say white people, Hispanic, and so on and so forth. So, take that with make of it as what you will. But yeah, Somalis, those guys are built different. Like there was someone who made a joke that said that in every marathon, there's always these 3 Somali guys that win it. And they just go around the world winning marathons. Because it's like train as much as you want. Prepare however you want to prepare. Just know that you're still going to get beat because their physiology is just different. Like
Well,
you can't.
I mean, I still got to submit the paternity test, right? But I mean, I'm like 95% confident it's my kid. You see my son, right?
Yeah.
You see,
I've seen this.
you see he's Chinese, right? Like
Yeah.
he doesn't look like he has any African traits at all. Why I was like, yo, we gotta get the paternity test for this one.
No,
But
it happens sometimes. Like for example, there was this grandmaster I saw, because I watch chess a lot. So there's this grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura. He streams on Twitch. He is like legendary in terms of his chess playing abilities, and I never knew he was mixed. He looks Japanese through and through, right? Only for him to show his mom recently on stream, and his mom is a white woman. And I was like, what? It blew my mind. It just blew my mind. Like he's purely Japanese. Let me see if I can find this picture. Let me show you. So let's see. Hikaru.
I mean, my kid, he's like slanted eyes. He's like yellow.
So,
Like he's straight Chinese.
so can you see my screen? Let me see if you can see my screen, right?
That's how.
Yeah, like I just assumed, oh, he's Japanese and just moved on. Later I realized that he's actually mixed. He's actually a white. He has a white mom.
The second to last first row, I could see him having white in them.
This
But
one.
that's like the only the second last. Or I'm sorry, the
This
first
one.
row, second to last.
That's this one.
Yeah, I could see white.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay.
And the second one of the second row, second column, second row, I could see
This
white
one.
in that one. But everything else, yeah, it's just yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, is what it is. Their genes are very strong. So. Where's the stream page? All right.
Sean's a European mutt. He's German, Norwegian, Polish, Irish, Swedish.
Yeah, Kezia Jones is from Lagos. Let me see. Who's Kezia Jones?
Who's that?
Her name looks familiar. Oh, his name. Okay, he's a Nigerian songwriter. Oh yeah. There are so many like talented people from Nigeria, you know. I could just keep going on the list, you know, from UFC fighters to writers to you know.
Well,
Yeah.
there's what you guys have 100 million people, right? I think you guys have the same population as Mexico. So I hope so.
No, we have more than. I think we're up to population of Nigeria. Nigerians are many. We're a lot. 195 million.
Oh. How many is Mexico? Mexico is probably just 100 million there. Because they probably lose 100,000 a year just to cartels, but
yeah. No, Mexico is 126 million.
Okay.
126 million. So
I used to spend time down there.
In Mexico?
Yeah, man. I used to stick out like a sore thumb, just kicking it down there. Mexico City and Cancun, those were my stomping grounds.
Nice.
Oh, it's been like what, almost 4 hours.
Yeah, since we've been talking, right? I really had lots of fun. I don't know if the 4 hours just flew by like nothing.
Yeah, my girl's mad at you right now. It's 11:30. Yeah, good stuff. Like, I think it's obvious that we have different philosophies about software development. Like, you are going into the plumbing of infrastructure, and I'm like, I don't care about that stuff. And I care more about like business domain modeling. But but I did learn something. I never even considered a mediator. I've always considered a mediator and not a collection of mediators through chain of responsibility. So that's something that's an interesting design pattern that I could like consider for whatever may require it. I mean, I still have an argument of, well, why do I have to have it was in the context of middleware, right? And so why should there be different instances of middleware? Why can't it just be a single middleware instance that has various responsibilities? But then one can argue that single responsibility, so maybe it makes sense that you have dedicated components of middleware to accommodate that.
It allows you easily pick and choose and swap. So the middleware now becomes the extensibility point. It's what allows things like Giraffe to exist, right? Because each middleware doesn't know what the other middleware are doing. All it knows is just, I take request, I manipulate it, I give response. That's it. So it gives the other middleware freedom to do whatever they like, you know?
Okay.
Without a particular middleware caring or being even touching what another middleware does. So yeah, that's pretty much how.
That's what I learned this morning. So
all right, cool.
From a programming perspective. So
yeah.
Well, I'm hopping off. I'm about to eat breakfast. It's been real, Odie. So thank you.
All right. Yeah, no problems. It's evening for me, so I think I should be closing up right now.
All right, Sean. All right, Daniel.
All right, Sean and Daniel.
So peace. I'm out. Any